Okay, Michamo, we're just getting it set up. We're gonna put a couple of links in the chat room. If you have any issues with the sound, just let me know. Make sure we can hear. Hold on one second. And we're gonna put a link in the chat room so you can follow along with the document. Okay, so that's the WordPress document link. Let me all right, so we're gonna go to our WordPress link. And again, if you have any, as a matter of fact, can somebody hit me up in the chat? Okay, let me know if you can hear in the chat room. It went in and came back out, so we just want to make sure everybody can hear that. Okay, can somebody send a link in, or say yes in the chat room if you can hear me? Okay, I know. Oh no, it went out, but then I had to switch it back on. So, okay. So is it? Can you hear now? Is it clear now? Okay. Okay. Sometimes Zoom will go in and out. We have to, log back in, but it'll happen once or twice during the session. Okay, so that's the link, the WordPress link that we posted. And we're gonna go to that right now. All right, so we're gonna go down to Bast part 2 on the WordPress site. We're gonna start with that. And we just want to make sure people are not trying to get in. Okay, so the link is in the chat room for that, just in case you couldn't see the image. So this is, I'll post a direct link for part 2 in the chat room. All right. Okay, so we wanted to go through this information, number one, because of the nature of the divinity. There's a lot of misinformation being propagated about the nature of this divinity, but of course, Bast is essential to our development, to our functioning and creation. She's a divinity, a force in nature that governs all of creation. Under the Abosom, under the Arit Ra, under the Vodou, under the Ntorot, as a matter of fact. So we need to know who she is, what her role in creation is, what her shrines in the body are. And what we did was we published the 3-part series, a 4-part series 3 years ago. Then we just published part 5 and part 6 over the past few weeks. So we want to go through that information plus the new sections, the new installments, so we can gain some clarity. So for those who are unfamiliar, my name is Odwirafo, Kwesi, Nehem, Ptah, Akhan. Odwirafo, Nation, North America. So we have a number of books. We've published 31 books to date. We have more books coming out. We have online courses in our Akhan institution. So we have 19 online courses to date that we taught over the past year and so forth, up from last July all the way up until this past June. We're going to start a new session this fall, so that information will be coming up. We'll be posting it this week. We'll be starting new 6-week courses and 4-week online courses on different subject matter and so forth. So we've also released our first documentary film. We won an award for that film last year. That film is available for you to watch online and so forth. So we'll get into all of that. But let's get into this part 2 of the divinity Bast. So we did part 1 and we were talking about a specific expression, an example of the energy, but part 2 is where we really get into the cosmology. So we want to start with part 2. So this is the cat divinity. In the related part 1, we talk about the Abosom and Akhan tradition, the Akhan people of Ghana and Ivory Coast. The term for divinities is Abosom. So we use that terminology. We are an Akhan organization, but we use that terminology. We show the connections between ancient Khanid and Kemet, Nubia and Egypt, and the Akhan language, culture, and ritual practices and so forth. So we say this, hold on one second. Yeah, Abosom, the deity Bast, often shown in her totemic form as the divine Mau or cat. That's the term in ancient Kemet for cat, Mau, just like meow and so forth. You have the same term for cat in the Akhan language. It is, of course, the set of sound vibrations that organically emanate from that entity. So we identify the entity by the set of sound vibrations that organically emanate from it. So whether you have meow, which is a term for cat, ga or ganga, which is a term for goose or gander because they ga or cackle. You have the term ru for lion because they ru or roar and so forth. So the natural sounds that emanate from this entity, that's how we identify the entity. And of course, when we utilize those sounds, whether you're making sounds of a cat or a dog and so forth, and you project those, the animal responds because they, identify with that configuration of sound vibrations because it's unique to them. So she's shown in her divine Mau or cat totemic form. She works with Het Heru, who is called Afi in Akhan, one of her praise names in Akhan, Afi. Het Heru and Bast work together. So we say, while the sensual attraction which facilitates the fusion of complementary opposites is the initiatory process of a relationship that's governed by Het Heru, the perpetuation of that fusion through affection is governed by Bast. So Het Heru governs the sensual attraction that's the precursor to sexual activity and the fusion of the Afurakani man, Afuraitkaitnit woman, African black man, African black woman. Het Heru, who is called Oshun in Yoruba and Irzuli in Vodun, and she's called Afi as well as Cheche in Akhan. She's that divinity, often called the divinity of fertility and love and so forth, but she's the central attraction that is the precursor to sexual activity, procreative activity, and the replenishment of its harmony. that force that draws us together in complementary fusion, someone who's your actual balance, your divine complementary balance, whose energetic configuration balances yours. You're naturally drawn together by that force, that magnetic force is Het Heru, quote unquote, Oshun, and so forth. She draws us together in a complementary fusion, complementary balance. And we unite, first and foremost, we come into contact with one another in life. She draws us together, make sure our paths cross so we can meet one another. Of course, we come together, develop a relationship, marriage and so forth. That also leads to copulation, that leads to bringing an ancestor or ancestors back into the world through reincarnation and so forth, through the procreative act. But Het Heru governs that central attraction that draws us together in complementary balance, that fusion. But once we're fused together, we need to perpetuate that fusion. And that force, that's the perpetuation of that complementary fusion, is affection. And that affection is governed by the female force in creation called Bast. Now we see the sacred vessel of Bast holding the unguents for healing and preservation. And we're going to show that it has its base in the heart, which is a repository for the balanced energy, which will be expressed through emotional affection. So we talk about the heart with regard to emotions and affection and so forth. We're going to get into that. But Bast has an unguent jar or perfume or oil jar. And she has her, unguents for healing and preservation, but that's connected to the heart. So we say Het Heru and Bast, attraction and affection, initiation and perpetuation of a complementary relationship on the cool, energetic, magnetic side is foundational to balance, the divine balance of Ma'at. So it's one thing to come together with your divine complement. We're not talking about just anybody you have some kind of attraction to, but the person whose energy is balances your energy out. You're naturally inclined towards, even before you incarnated in the world, this individual's energy was naturally balanced with regard to yours and yours with regard to them. At some point we cross paths because we're drawn to, one another when we align with our ancestresses and ancestors in Samanfo, as well as the Abosom, inclusive of Het Heru. We're naturally drawn to one another at some point in life. That fusion takes place, but we need to perpetuate that fusion. You can't just fuse together and then, people fuse together and then they break up. What perpetuates that fusion? Once you have that complementary balance, how do you perpetuate that balance? That perpetuation of that fusion has to do with not only relationship stability, but it also has to do with the stability of the Afurakani, or African mind, the stability of relationships, stability of marriages, stability of families and so forth. And strong families are the foundation of nation building. So there's a national, quote unquote, security aspect to it with regard to the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit national or nation. So we're gonna look at this unguent jar that you see associated with the divinity Bast. Now, this unguent jar, as we see here from ancient Kemet, it's one from the Middle Empire about 4,000 years ago. That's the unguent jar associated with her. It keeps her ointments, oils, and perfumes, is akin to the pericardium, the fluid-filled sac encasing the heart. Now, when you look at the name Bast, you'll see it's the unguent jar here. You see the symbol for the T sound, so that's Bast. And then the seated female divinity, and she is mummified or shrouded, showing this is a female divinity. So it's Bast plus showing that that's not just the name of a woman, but the name of a female divinity. Here are the Medutu that make up the name, different spellings of the name Bast, also Bastet and so forth. And so you'll see the different spellings. But this is the unguent jar, keeps her oils and perfumes, but it's akin to, and the shrine for Bast within the body is the pericardium. That is the fluid-filled sac that surrounds the heart. It protects and holds the heart in place. The fluid within the pericardium acts as a lubricant for the heart. It is also connected to the roots of the great blood vessels. So as we can see that right here. So this is the pericardium. It is a vessel. It's a jar within which the heart is seated. So we see the direct connection between Bast, and when they talk about Bast being a female divinity of love and fertility and so forth, and affection and things like that, they know that in general, but they don't know why. They don't know where she's seated, and they don't know what her role in creation is. So they mix up her role and so forth. We attune to her, even though we may not know her name specifically. She exists, of course, in all of the various traditions under different names. In the Orisha tradition, in the Abosom tradition of the Akhan, in the Vodou tradition and so forth. She exists, of course, in all those traditions. She's a force in nature. She's the pericardium within the great divine body of the Supreme Being. So she exists in all these different traditions. Instinctively, we will attune to her. We will feel that energy of affection. But it's important to begin to know as we mature as adults to understand exactly where the divinities are seated and how to interact with them. Now, just like your physical organs in your body, your organs and glands, as we always say, you don't have to know. Hold on one second, I wanna make sure people can get in. Okay, so you don't have to know everything about your liver and your spleen and your organs, you know, for them to function. They're going to function just by nature of the fact that they were designed to function in a certain way. As long as your life force energy is animating your body, these organs are going to function. But the more you learn about them as you become mature, the better decisions you make so that you can align your thoughts, intentions, and actions with the proper functioning of your organs. You put things in your body that support their functioning. You stay away from things that do not support their functioning will create disorder within the body. The same is true with regard to the Orisha, the Abosom, the Vodou, and so forth, the Ntorot. We don't have to know every single thing about them in order for them to function in creation, obviously. They're the forces in nature that govern all aspects of creation. They are literally, the deities are literally the organs within the great divine body of the Supreme Being. So Amen and Amenet are the great divine mother and father, Supreme Being and so forth, called Inyamewa and Inyame and so forth, and Akhan. So that's the great divine body of creation. But the organs within the great divine body that regulate order within creation are the Abosom, the Orisha, the Vodou, the Ntorot, the deities. They regulate order in creation, just like your organs regulate order within your great divine body. So it's Afurakani men, African Black men, we are emanations of Amen or Inyame. Afuraitkaitnit women, African Black women, are emanations of Amenet, the great mother. And in the same fashion, on a microcosmic level, you as the great being, you give birth to smaller beings within your great body, which are the organs. They regulate order within your body, and those organs give birth to smaller beings, which are the cells. And the cells, when they support the organ, their parent divinity, they support you, the Supreme Being, at the same time. And we are the cells within the great divine body of the Supreme Being. We are children of specific organs. That is us. That includes plant life, animal life, mineral life, and Afurakani, or African Black human life. And Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, African Black human life only. We are the cells within the great divine body of the Supreme Being, but we are cells of specific organs and glands within the great divine body. Those organs and glands are our parent organs and glands. If you're a child of the heart, child of the immune system, glands and organs and structures and so forth, then that is your parent organ or structure. That is your parent Abosom, your parent Orisha, your parent Vodou and so forth. And when you serve your parent Vodou or Orisha Abosom, when you serve your parent divinity as a cell within that parent organ, when you serve your parent organ, then you're serving the great being at the same time. That's the structure. So the more you learn about just like the more you learn about your own organs, you will put food, food choices will reflect that understanding. You'll put things in your system that facilitate the functioning of the organs properly, optimally. You will not put things in your system that will create disorder. If things go wrong, you understand, okay, this organ governs this particular function, so I need to take this kind of herb or vitamin or mineral and so forth, or some combination thereof to restore balance. So the more you learn about the functioning, the better decisions you can make, and you can, live optimally. The more we learn about the abosom and Vodou, Orisha, and so forth, the more we make better decisions so we can align our thoughts, intentions, and actions in harmony with divine order every moment of every day. That is our responsibility as adults. As we move from childhood to adulthood, it is our responsibility to learn what our function in creation is, what kind of cell within the great divine body we are, how to align our thoughts, intentions, and actions with that divine function, how to serve our parent divinities and so forth. And when we make mistakes, how to realign ourselves ritually so we can get back on track with executing our function in creation. So this is why we need to, and then we can see how it applies not only to ourselves individually, but also to our community as a communal body. So when we look at Bast on an individual level, physically governing the pericardium, how do we keep that functioning optimally? On a spiritual level, when she governs the spiritual pericardium and so forth, the spiritual Unju and Jar and so forth, how does that relate to relationships? How does that relate to the perpetuation of a complementary fusion? That attraction that Het Heru facilitates, how do we perpetuate that attraction in the context of affection so we can keep that divinely fused complementary relationship going, perpetually. So let's first, we're going to get into we want to look at the pericardium on a physical level first. And of course, if you have any questions, you can post them in the chat room and so forth. So, okay, so we already showed, so the pericardium, called the pericardial sac, is a double-walled sac containing the heart and the roots of the great vessels. The pericardial sac has two layers, a serous layer and a fibrous layer. It encloses the pericardial cavity, which contains pericardial fluid. The pericardium fixes the heart to the mediastinum, gives protection against infection, and provides lubrication for the heart. So these are two different functions. You have the protection against infection, and you see Bast as the cat divinity, but sometimes she's wielding knives, and she's a protectress, of course, protectress of her kittens, but protectress of the Ainsu, the king, as well as the Hemat, the queen mother, and so forth. She has a divine protective function, and sometimes she takes the form of a lioness, sometimes the form of a cat, sometimes the form of a lioness, which we're going to get into. And she has that protectress function, but then she also has that lubricating function, the lubrication function of the heart, the protection against infection, and the lubrication of the heart, these expansive and contractive, or contractive and expansive functions. Spiritually, the spiritual force, she has that protective aspect where she can repel that electromagnetic energy operating through that center of resonance, can repel discarnate and disordered entities, projections from other individuals, repel them. That's the protective aspect. So you can preserve that affection, preserve that relationship that you've been fused with through Het Heru. She can protect that, but then the lubrication of the heart, just like the protection against infection, the pericardium protects against bacteria, free radicals, other viral agents and so forth. Bast does that on a spiritual level to repel discarnate spirits that become bacterial agents, viral agents, and so forth, free radical agents in our spiritual and magnetic field. So she can repel that just like she does through the pericardium. But then the lubricating aspect is that aspect where she nourishes, lubricates, and perpetuates what's going on with regard to the heart. She perpetuates the fusion that Het Heru facilitated through that agency of affection. So, and then when we look at the structure, the pericardium is a tough, double-layered fibroelastic sac which covers the heart, the space between the two layers of serous pericardium. The pericardial cavity is filled with a serous fluid, which protects the heart from any kind of external jerk or shock. So it's protecting from an external jerk or shock. The same thing has to do with our relationships. As we say, Het Heru brought us together through attraction, divinely ordered fusion. But when we have relationships, and we want them to be perpetuated. It's no different than the sperm cell uniting with the ovum and so forth. There's a fusion that takes place, but that fusion must be perpetuated so that the cell division can occur and the embryo can develop and eventually into a fully grown, developed child, so that birth can take place. The perpetuation of the initial fusion must take place. If there's a disruption in that, that fusion, then there's going to be a problem. So when it talks about the pericardium protects the heart from any kind of external jerk or shock, in the same fashion, Bast protects the spiritual heart against any kind of external jerk or shock. Negative ideas, negative energy being projected by other individuals, negative behaviors by other individuals, or even internally, internalized conditionings, the things we've been conditioned, by negatively from this society, from media, social media, television, school, pseudo-religious institutions like Christianity and Islam and Judaism and Hinduism and all that nonsense, Buddhism, all these different false ideas that will create, discordance within our relationships because we have, have accepted different values, or we've internalized these things, or if we've internalized traumas and so forth and project those traumas out to the person that we're connected with, that can create, those quote unquote jerks and shocks. Bast, through affection, facilitates the process whereby we can overcome that and protect the heart, protect that fusion, that balance. All right, so we're gonna go back. So for those who just got in, this is on the WordPress site, on our WordPress site, the link is in the chat room. This is Bast part 2. And when you go to the WordPress site, it's a direct link to that. So as you can see, we have, the name spelled in different ways. Basti, this unguent jar, also the new container and so forth. Salve, unguent, unguent vase, oil bottle and so forth. Here, the pronunciation Best, Beset and so forth. And then we look in the Akhan language, the tree language of the Akhan, Beseng, a palm oil pot. And Beseng, meaning a palm oil pot in Akhan, is the same as Best or Beset, which is the oil jar or vase in ancient Kemet, same language, of course. Palm nuts are used for adebisa, for divination. So that's directly related to Bast's role as, one who, we're going to talk about the cat's eyes and so forth, and the eye of the moon and intuition and divination and so forth. But that has to do with the ritual function, the one that can be able to see into the different structures that affect balance and imbalance. You engage the divinatory process. You find out from the abosom, from the nsaman, from the deities, the ancestral spirits, how you got off track, what you need to do to get back on track ritually and so forth. That's what divination is. So this Beseng, this palm oil pot in the Akhan tradition, has to do with divination, ritual practice and so forth. It's the same Beseng, the ritual pot, the pericardium in the body, but the spiritual pericardium that surrounds the spiritual heart in the spirit body and so forth, same piece. And you will also see that one of the spellings of Bast, the Ba portion, is the symbol of the Ba bird. This is the Ba bird. The term Ba means spirit in ancient Kemet. So a male has a Ba, a spirit, and a female has the Baet, spirit. So you see the same bird with the T sound, which is the feminizing suffix. So Ba means spirit, Baet means spirit, feminine. Ka is the soul, and Kaet is the soul. So the divinity in the head region, we have a force in the head region that guides our thoughts, intentions, and actions. It's a divinity that encases within its structure our divine function we are to execute in the world. It's like the spirit's brain. The Ka for males, Kaet for females is called Kra in Akhan, and Krawa for females in Akhan. It is the Orderi Inu in the Yoruba tradition. The inner spiritual head, the divinity in the head region, that is the Ka, the kayak, the soul, the divine consciousness. It has the blueprint for everything that should happen in the life of the individual, the spirit, body of the individual, and so forth, just as the brain has the blueprint for everything that should take place within the body. So the ka is the spirit's brain, the divinity in the head region. But the ba is the divine living energy, the spirit, the force, the divine living energy, that solar force that animates us. And we're going to get into that right now. So, so we said Bast is the divinity protecting the heart, emotional stability. Remember, if the pericardium and the sac is protecting the heart from any jerks or shocks and so forth, it's stabilizing the heart. The energy of Bast surrounding the spiritual heart is dealing with emotional stability. So she protects the heart through emotional stability, through affection. The lubricant perpetuating the complementary fusion of the Afurakani African man and Afuraitkaitnit African woman. The means by which Bast can affect this function is through the divine living energy circulating throughout the spirit body. So it's one thing to say that she governs the spiritual, surrounds the spiritual heart and so forth. It's another thing to understand how is she able to do that? Through what mechanism is she able to provide that emotional stability? And that has to do with the ba and the bayat. Now, before we go a little bit further, let me just pull this up right quick, just so you can have another schematic with regard to this. Okay. So what we're showing here is scientists find oddly behaving inner core at Earth's center. Now, we talk about the shrine of Bast within the body. That's the pericardium surrounding the heart. Spiritually, there's the spiritual heart, which is called Ab in ancient Kemet. It's Ebba in Akhan. So you have the Ka, which is the soul. You have the Ba, which is the divine living energy. You have the Sahu, which is the spirit body and so forth. You have the Ab, which is the spiritual heart. So you have this pericardial sac, this unguent jar surrounding the physical heart, but then you also have it surrounding the spiritual heart. That's in the physical body, but then you also have on Earth, we can show the same structure. Earth, we know about Earth's core, which is like a solid ball and so forth, mainly of iron and all of that. Then you have the outer core, which is more of a liquid core and so forth. But scientists have found an inner, not only the inner core, but the inner core. Now in our cosmology, and we'll just put a picture of this up real quick. Okay, so this image right here, well, we can just shrink it down a little bit, but this is an image of Ptah and Bast. So you'll find that Ptah and Bast are united as husband and wife, and they give birth to the male lion divinity Mahes. So you have Ptah and Sekhmet, who are also united, and they give birth to Nefertim. But Ptah and Bast are united, and they give birth to Mahes. Now, Ptah is the divinity who is at the inner core of Earth. And you see him mummified, and he has on the skull cap and so forth. His name, Ptah, means the one who fashions and so forth. He's the divine fashioner of forms. He's seated in the brain. He's fashioning thought forms and so forth. And the energetic force of thought forms, when they're properly structured, when you read the cosmology of Ptah and the Shabaka text, the so-called men-fight theology of the Shabaka text, they talk about Ptah taking the divine living energy of Ra and Ra'ad and fashioning the forms of planets and the forms of stars and the forms of mountains and the forms of rivers and the entire earth and so forth. He's the one who fashions all things, fashions the natural forms of all things. And then once things are formed, planets, suns, moons, stars, earth, oceans, rivers, mountains, and so forth, he gives them their proper form. He's fashioning. Then the divine living energy of Ra and Ra'ad can move through those properly structured forms, and that energy can radiate harmoniously. So if you look at different instruments, for example, you can have a trumpet. You could have a trumpet, you could have a trombone, you can have a, hold on one second, I just want to pull this up. You can have a trumpet, you can have a trombone, you can have a French horn, you can have a tuba and so forth. You can have these different entities, and when you blow into them, each one, the sounds are going to come out different. The configuration of sound vibrations will manifest different tones and so forth. The same source of air, but because it's moving through a different structure, the sound vibrations are different. The radiation is different. The divine living energy of Ra and Ra'ad moving through naturally created entities, whether it's plant life, animal life, mineral life, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, human life, planets, sun, moon, stars, black substance, space, oceans, rivers, streams, the atmosphere, black earth, red earth, the core, the mantle, upper mantle and crust and so forth, all these different things. And that divine living energy of Ra and Ra'ad is moving, expanding, and contracting through these different aspects of creation. Because they have specific forms, there's a configuration of sound vibrations that is unique to the form that emanates from that entity. The same is true with us. No one has your exact spiritual form. You're an instrument. When that divine living energy moves through you like a wind chime and so forth that radiates sound, and that divine living energy of Ra and Ra'ad moves through the Afurakani man or Afuraitkaitnit woman, because we have a specific form. There's a specific configuration of sound vibrations unique to your form that emanates from you, that actually makes up your true name. So when you replicate that with your vocal cords, you are enunciating your true name. That's what ancestral naming ceremonies are based on, and naming practices are based on, attuning to that set of sound vibrations and replicating them to stimulate them. So when Ptah fashions forms, then the divine living energy moves through those unique forms, and each form generates its own unique configuration of sound vibrations and energetic output and so forth. So Ptah is the divine fashion. He's deep within the core. Sekhmet is also, when he's connected with Sekhmet, she's deep within the core as well. She's the lymphatic system and so forth. That is the core, deep within the bone marrow and so forth. That's the major lymphoid organ and so forth. So Sekhmet, those immune system cells being generated within the bone marrow, she's deep within the core, and Ptah is deep within the core as well. So that is the inner core. So that's Ptah and Sekhmet in the inner core. But then you have that's the inner core. It says scientists have found oddly behaving inner core at Earth's center. And what they're talking about here basically is there's the inner core, then there's the core that people knew about all along, the inner core, and then the outer core. The inner core is where Ptah and Sekhmet reside. Then the inner core, this is the inner core here where Ptah and Sekhmet reside. Ptah is deep inside, mummified and so forth, engaged in his workshop, his fashioning workshop and so forth. Ptah and Sekhmet are there, but then surrounding the inner core is the inner core that everybody knew about. That is the core surrounding the inner core, and that is the pericardium function, and that is where Bast can be found in Earth. And then the outer core, you know, you have Heru, and then you have the lower mantle and upper mantle. You have Atem and Asase Nebet Tepet and so forth, and then you have Shu and Tefnut and Geb and Nut and so forth. And you have these different layers of Earth, and then Asara, Set Nebet Het, black Earth and river waters and red Earth and rain waters and so forth. So on every level, you see the unfolding of the cosmology. But the key is the inner core is Ptah and Sekhmet. Then the core surrounding that, the regular inner core is Bast, that is the pericardial sac around the inner core. So we just wanted to show on Earth, she has a shrine. In the body, she has a shrine. And spiritually, she has a shrine as well. So going back to the WordPress document. So the Ba and the Bayat, the spirit of the male, the spirit of the female, and so forth. Just as the heart sends blood throughout the circulatory system, feeding all of the organs and structures, so does the spiritual heart center send energy throughout the spirit body, feeding, nourishing the spiritual anatomy. So your heart is sending out blood, oxygen, every cell in the body receives that oxygen. Your spiritual heart center, the ab and so forth, is sending out energetic projections throughout the spirit body to feed and nourish the spirit body. These energetic projections from the spiritual heart center extend beyond the physical body and the kahibit, which is the aura, and reach those connected to us in the world. So the Earth has a magnetosphere, and we have a magnetosphere. We have that, you know, aura and so forth is called kahibit in ancient Kemet. We have a magnetic field surrounding us, just like any other animate and inanimate objects have magnetic fields and so forth. We have that. The life force energy circulating through us generates a magnetic field. And that's the first thing that touches, you know, other entities. Before we can physically touch them, the field touches them. It's no different than two magnets on a table. If you have the same polarities facing, the like polarities facing north and north or south and south, as you move them closer together, when they get close enough, if they're like polarities facing, they will repel each other before they touch. The magnetic field is the first thing that touches before the physical body of the entity touches. The same is true with us. Now, so we say just as Asase, the Earth Mother, that's the term for our Earth Mother in Akhan, same thing in ancient Khanid and Kemet, Asase Nebet Tepet, the fertile Earth Mother. Just as Asase has a magnetosphere, so do we have an electromagnetic field surrounding our bodies. This is true of all entities, animate and inanimate. Moreover, the divine living energy of Ra and Ra'et, the creator and creatress, in Yokumpon and in Yokunton and Akhan and Odumare and Oshumare and Yoruba, that is Da and Ida Huedo and Vodun, the creator and creatress, their energy permeates and animates the magnetosphere of Asase of Earth and all created entities, naturally created entities. Plant life, animal life, mineral life, and Afurakani, or the African human life. So the divine living energy of Ra and Ra'et, the spirit, is called the Ba and Ba'et. So while we're gonna flip over real quick, just so you can see this. We're gonna go over to our article on breath and the spirit to get some more insight on the Ba and the Ba'et. So you'll see very often that the Ba or Ba'et is shown as a bird, a human-headed bird, male or female and so forth, showing that's the spirit that belongs to the individual, as you can see here. So the term for spirit, divine living energy, we talk about soul as the spirit's brain, the divinity in the head. But the solar energies surging throughout your system, that is the Ba, the Ba'et. So divine living energy animating us, that's the Ba for males, Bayat for females. This spirit, this Ba or Bayat, as you see here, is a child of Ra and Ra'at, the creator and creatress. Ra and Ra'at use their divine living energy to animate the sun, the Aten, Atenit, Ra and Ra'at are not the sun god or sun goddess. Aten is the sun god, Atenit is the sun goddess. Ra and Ra'at use their divine living energy to penetrate the Aten, the Atenit, the sun, and use that as a physical transmitter of their energy. And they also penetrate other stars and utilize those stars as physical transmitters of their energy. So that's solar fire and so forth, wielded by Ra and Ra'at through the agency of the sun, through the Aten, the Atenit, wielding that fire energy of Ra and Ra'at, that solar energy. Ra and Ra'at are the creative powers, male and female, and they give birth to smaller spirits. Ra and Ra'at, the creator and creatress, are the great Ba, the great spirit, the great Bayat, the great spirit. So their names are Ra and Ra'at, but they are the great spirit, and they give birth to smaller spirits. Just like solar, and just like you have water, the ocean, it gives birth to smaller entities, raindrops and so forth after, convection and condensation and precipitation and so forth. The smaller drops are still H2O, they're just smaller in quantity, but they come from the parent ocean. The solar energy streaming from the Aten, the Atenit, gives birth to solar rays and so forth. These drops of solar energy, in the same fashion, Ra and Ra'at, the divine living energy, animating all of creation, they give birth to smaller spiritual entities, spirits, smaller. They give birth to the divine living energy that's going to take up residence within your spirit body. They assign a spirit, a Ba, if you're male, a Ba'et, if you're female, a divinity to take up residence inside your spirit body. And that spirit takes up residence inside your spirit body pre-incarnation. And then as you're operating, you're born into the world, you're growing and developing and so forth, you can direct that little bird that's flying throughout your spirit body. You can direct that energy to your arms, your hands, through martial arts and so forth, direct it to your, digestive system, direct it through quote unquote fire breathing for ritual and so forth. You can direct that solar bird inside of you to expand its force within you. But it is a divinity, is a child of Ra and Ra'at that you have direct connection to and you have jurisdiction over, but it only serves ultimately Ra and Ra'at. So that spirit, that child of Ra and Ra'at, takes up residence inside of you. Now, and it's important to know that structure to understand how Bast executes or functions, so you have to know about the Ba and Bayat in order to understand. So this spiritual force that gets inside of your body, just like solar energy coming from the outside and getting inside of you and heating you up and so forth, you just got filled up with some firepower. This divine spiritual force from Ra and Ra'at takes up residence inside of you and begins to expand its force within you. Now, as we said, Ra and Ra'at is the creator and creatress in Yonkumpon and in Yonkuntong. The titles in Akhan, Odumare and Oshumare in Yoruba, Da Naida, Ido, Huedo in Vodun. Now, as we said, they take up residence inside your spiritual body. This is the divine living energy that animates us. It's the Ba and Bayat. Now, that's different from Sekhem. Sekhem is that divine living energy when it's concentrated into a force or a point. Similar to, you have solar energy or electromagnetic energy. You can take a magnifying glass and have that solar energy move through the magnifying glass, and it comes to a point, and you can direct it over some dry leaves and cause them to combust and so forth. You have concentrated the energy to a point and used it as a force. It went from divine living energy, radiant solar energy, concentrated into a point, and that concentrated energy is Sekhem. That's Sekhem force. But the divine living energy, or quote unquote life force energy, that is the Ba and Bayat. So Now, we say it's the divine living energy that animates us. It's the divine force operant within the solar fire, which we can direct ritually. Through ritual song, ritual dance, libation, and so forth, we can direct this energy ritually. Now, it is seated in the heart-lung complex. Now, we say we absorb solar energy and heat through the breath. This solar energy is carried within the oxygen through the bloodstream, thereby permeating the entire body. In the same fashion, the divine living energy animate within and through the solar fire permeates our entire spirit body. We are not only vitalized by this energy, but for Afurakani people, African Black people only, our Bayat is also our energetic link to the Ba'u Baitu, the spirits of the deities and ancestral spirits. So you see the Ba sometimes as a human-headed bird with a bowl of burning incense with a flame arising from the bowl, showing it's an animate, winged fire, burning incense with a flame. So you have an animate flame or animate fire within you. That's what life force energy is, an animate fire. And the wings fan the flame and cause it to expand and contract and so forth. So sometimes shown with the head of the human that the bird belongs to. Sometimes it's just shown as a bird with a bowl of burning incense. Sometimes shown as the bird with the head of the human being that that bird belongs to, that's assigned to, that that spirit is assigned to. Sometimes shown as the human-headed bird with the solar disk on the head, just showing again the solar fire, it's an animate fire. And this is another example of the royal Yuya from the 18th dynasty of Kemet and so forth. He's, you know, that was his Ba spirit and so forth. Now we talk about the Ba spirits seated in the within the heart as well and so forth. So your heart is sending out blood, which carries the oxygen. The Ba spirit is seated in the heart. When you see this, one second. When you see the heart and then you see the wings and so forth, what you're seeing is the breast of the bird. The breast of the bird is akin to the heart, and the wings are the lungs and so forth. And of course, the head is here. You have that little bird sitting inside you. When your lungs expand and contract, that is the fanning of the flames of the life force energy within you. That little bird is expanding and contracting within you. So you have a little bird seated within you. Your head, of course, spiritually, the spiritual energy, the head, the breast, which is where the heart is, and the lungs, the folded down wings are the lungs and so forth, and the wings flap, that's expansion and contraction of the lungs. So you have physically a Ba bird seated within your body. And then when you begin to expand and contract, you make that bird begin to expand and contract, and the life force energy expands, the fire energy increases and so forth. You can redirect that fire energy in different paths. Now, so we need to understand that structure in order to understand how Bast does her thing. So go back up. Okay, so this is another example. This is the Ba bird, as a matter of fact, found in the tomb of Nefertari II and so forth. That was her Ba, the divine living energy that was dwelling inside of her and so forth. This is a Ba bird from the papyrus of Ani. As we mentioned before, we have a Ka, the soul, the divine consciousness in the head region, guiding our thoughts, intentions, and actions. That's the divinity in the head region. But we have the Ba, the spirit, that's animating us. Now, we said the critical part is through ritual, we can connect this Ba energy within us, this sacred bird, to link with the Ba energy of different deities, different Abosom, Orisha, Vodou, and so forth. All the deities are spirits. They have a Ba and so forth. They are spirits. They have animate energy and so forth according to their nature. The Ba, the divine solar force within us, when we engage in ritual practice, it links with the Ba, the divine energetic force within the divinities. Once that bridge of energy is made, then our spirits and their spirits can travel across that bridge, and spirit possession can take place, divination can take place, and so forth. We can become animated when spirit enters the body and moves through the body of the person during spirit possession, or when you're at the shrine and so forth. Your Bayat is a link to the Bayat of the divinities. The whites in our spring do not have a Ba or Bayat. They do not have a Ka or Kayat. They have lower level electromagnetic energy, no different than a rock or a penny or a book and so forth. There's electromagnetic energy emanating from inanimate objects just by virtue of the fact that there are protons, neutrons, and electrons, and there's electrons are orbiting and so forth. So there's an electromagnetic field. And when they're dealing with some little pseudo ritual and so forth, you have some white Asian or some white European doing some yoga and talking about they're expanding their energy and stimulating Kundalini and so forth. They have never connected with Kundalini ever. They've never connected with any divinity because they don't have the capacity to. They're just expanding and contracting lower level electromagnetic energy and passing that off as spirituality. But that's nothing. We have a Ba. We have a divinity within us. We have a Ba'et, a divinity within us, and it connects with the Ba and Ba'et of the Abosom, the Orisha, and so forth. And then spirit possession can take place and communication can take place, and we can be informed by the Orisha, the Vodou, the Abosom. We can be informed by the Nananoma and Sama for our spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors on the nature of creation, what's in harmony with divine order, how to incorporate those things that are harmonious, and how to restore balance ritually when imbalance manifests. That's the difference between us. Now, so we talk about that, and we give an example of, spirit possession is akin to, just like if you can take a deep breath and hold the deep breath within your lungs and so forth, you have a pocket of air in your lungs, and it's, from the great source of air in the atmosphere. And if you take that deep breath, the link between the air in your lungs through the trachea out to the great source of air surrounding you, there's a direct link between that pocket and its source, and that there's a continuous circuit now, and you can be animated by that. That divine solar energy operating within you. When you engage the ritual process, you make an energetic link from that solar energy within you to the energy of the Creator and Creatress, Ra and Ra'et, as well as the Abosom, the Orisha, Vodou, and so forth. And there's a bridge of energy that can be traveled across for communication as well as possession, and we have that capacity. So now, we say, so that's part of our spiritual anatomy. When we are unaware of our spiritual anatomy, we neglect our consciousness, we abdicate our responsibilities, we do not align our thoughts, intentions, and actions with the Ka at the soul, the divine consciousness that has the blueprint of how we are to function in the world. We neglect that and just go based on what we're lusting after, what we've been conditioned to lust after, and we create disordered circumstances in life. So we're not in alignment, we're making bad decisions, expressive of disorders, we say in the article, as opposed to good decisions, reflective of order. If we're unaware of our spiritual anatomy, on the spirit side, we neglect our power, we abdicate our authority, we do not direct our Ba, the divine living energy force within us. We don't direct it to align with the harmonious flow of the forces in creation. We will project discordant, dissonant vibrations expressive of misguided emotional energy, anxiety, depression, displaced anger, and so forth, and create negative circumstances. And it can also lead, as we say, the addictive expression of discordant behavior until the cycle habits are broken, whether it's leading to addiction, substance abuse, and so forth, or other kinds of addictions, compulsions, obsessive compulsive, behavior, and so forth, when we're out of alignment with the divine living energy that animates us. Now, so that's what happens when we are unaware of our spiritual anatomy, and then we abdicate our responsibility because we're unaware of our spiritual anatomy. Now, with regard to relationships, that's the most destructive. The disalignment from the Afurakani man and Afuraitkaitnit woman projects disalignment and disorder within the family, community, and Afuraitkaitnit nation. even if when we've been guided by Het Heru to our complement, our capacity to perpetuate that complementary relationship through affection, through Bast, is compromised when we are unaware of her role and the role of the Ba in relationship to her. Imagine the heart attempting to function without the pericardium. The entire body suffers because the heart is not stabilized, it's not protected from jerks and shocks, and so forth. So the entire body is destabilized. So some people will assume that if Het Heru, Afi, Oshun brings them together with the person they know is their divine complement, well, that's all they need. But then they begin to suffer in relationships because they don't recognize the role of Bast to not only recognize that fusion, but to perpetuate that fusion through affection. So the ritual invocation of Bast, by her various names and so forth, but her ritual invocation is key to the continuity of relationships individually, but also to the stability of the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit nation. So now we mentioned the Afuraitkaitnit woman is the primary vessel of Bast, while the Afurakani man is the secondary vessel. Conversely, the Afurakani man is the primary vessel of the male deity Ptah. As we just showed, Ptah, husband of Bast and so forth, the Afuraitkaitnit woman is the secondary vessel. So we have their energy in our systems. Of course, the woman is going to be more expressive of the feminine energy, but males have a pericardium as well. In the same fashion, on the flip side, you know, Ptah's energy is in the woman as well. Just like we have the sperm cell of the father and the DNA, the genetic material of the father and the genetic material of the mother. Males have that, females have that. Of course, the feminine aspect is going to be more expressive through females. The masculine aspect is going to be more expressive through males, but we all are connected to Bast. And because that perpetuation of affection takes place within her domain, males as well as females must invoke this divinity. So for example, if the Afuraitkaitnit woman is unaware of the nature of her Bayet, her spirit, she is at a loss with regard to regulating the affective nature of her power. White culture works to maintain this disharmonious condition through devaluation. We must effect revaluation. So when we're taken away from our culture, we're not even thinking about, at most we'll have some, you know, kind of fantasy idea of, you know, Oshun governs, you know, love and sexuality and sensuality and so forth, and anybody we're strongly attracted to, that must be the Oshun energy and so forth. And even if we're just lusting, we'll try to attach that to Oshun, which is totally inaccurate. But then that, even if we connect with the right person, we can't perpetuate it because the function of Het Heru in the true sense, as well as Bast and every other female divinity, is devalued in white culture. And we have to engage the process of revaluation by realigning with the divinity. So we gave an example, a little example here, but we'll get back to the example, but we want to get more into the cosmology. So we're going to get into part 3. And it's on the same WordPress site when you go, you know, go further down. So the most important piece, first and foremost, on the spiritual side, you have Bast operating within the heart, spiritual heart center. She governs affection, the perpetuation of the initiatory fusion. Het Heru brings us together. Bast perpetuates that union. Without Bast, there's no perpetuation of a union. Relationships fall apart. Through invocation of Het Heru, we learn who we need to connect with, who we're balanced with, and so forth. We attune to beauty and harmony and so forth. And beauty is just a revelation of harmony and so forth, the manifestation of divine order. So we attune to her. We can attune to what is beautiful, meaning what is in harmony with order, what is expressive of order, inclusive of relationships. And she will lead us to cross paths with the individual we need to connect with and give us the proper mechanism on how to fuse with that individual. First through a relationship, eventually through marriage and so forth. And it's critical because when we fuse together, we're not just coming together for ourselves, which is important for our own balance our own functioning in the world, executing our function, whether it's through business, through communal nation building and so forth, through our own, physical balance and healing. But also when we fuse together, eventually we're going to bring Nsamantho, ancestresses and ancestors back into the world through that fusion that was initiated by Het Heru. So we want to perpetuate that balanced fusion. So when we bring our ancestresses and ancestors back into the world and we're raising them, we can raise them in a balanced, culturally grounded environment so we can help them unfold the understanding of who they are, why they came back into the world, and what they have to contribute to the Oman, to the nation, the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit nation. So it's about spiritual development, spiritual realignment, but also with regard to us as nationists. We talk about nationism, the purification of nationalism. We're talking about nation building rooted in our ancestral religious values. It has to do with communal balance as well as individual spiritual balance. So part 3, we have from cat to lioness, nurturer to warrioress. So you'll see a different form of Bast with the lion, lioness head and so forth. So when Bast is functioning in her protective, nurturing role, pericardium protects against infection. Bast, through that spiritual pericardium, the spiritual force surrounding the spiritual heart, repelling, just like a magnet, repelling the other magnet, repelling projections from other individuals, repelling the encounters from discarnate spiritual entities, whether it's discarnate relatives, deceased relatives or non-relatives who were negative individuals who are trying to push some negativity on you. People say ever since they were a child, they were, they always felt this strong push towards the same sex and this push away from the opposite sex and so forth. And they have some uncle who was a molester who transitioned he's the same filthy spirit as an earthbound, discarnate, disordered, deceased entity. So his spirit is still hanging around and so forth, and the child is receptive to that energy. So that molester is still trying to push that negative perversity. So they feel this push towards the same sex. And when they get near the opposite sex, they feel a negative, energy. That's because that perverse spirit is still trying to engage that same negative behavior that he did when he was on earth. Ritually, all we have to do is remove that spirit and punish that spirit, but remove that spirit ritually. And those artificial feelings that the child was feeling ever since they were a child, and even into adulthood, they won't feel them anymore because they were never theirs in the first place. So this idea that they were born homosexual, dissexual, and so forth, that's nonsense. So, but those kinds of things, somebody pressing somebody to engage in self-destructive behavior, addictions, criminality and so forth, Bast can repel these negative spirits. And what she's shown is the lioness and so forth, protectress and so forth. She has that capacity. Just like physically, she has the capacity in the pericardium to repel infections and protect the heart. So when she's functioning in her protective, nurturing role with regard to children and family, as well as affection and relationships, she operates through her achinebois, which is the Akhan term for animal totem of the meow, the cat. Yet the Njumanjara Bast, the pericardium, can also contain an increased fire as a result of the fanning of the flames of the Ba'at spirit. So you expand and contract your lungs, you fan the flames, that fire energy within you, that Ba'at spirit, shown with the burning bowl of burning incense, that flame begins to expand when you fan the flames and so forth. You increase that fire. Now, and once that fire is increased, then you can get to that fiery protective role. Now, we noted that the Ba'at spirit is depicted as a bird, a human-headed bird, and also a bird with a bowl of burning incense in front of it. The divine living energy of Ra and Ra'et, creator and creatress, is dispensed to us by Ra and Ra'et through the agency of the Ba, male, and Ba'at, female spirit, that is assigned to animate our spirit bodies and physical bodies. As we said, when the wings of the bird fan the flames of the incense, the fire increases. We become fired up. Our aura becomes more fiery and vibrant. Here, Bast is working in harmony with Wajet. Wajet and Nekabet govern the electric and magnetic aspects of the magnetosphere, electromagnetic field surrounding the planet and also surrounding us. Bast thus takes on the form of the lioness, the great cat, as you can see in this depiction. And she has the solar disk and the serpent on her head, and Wajet is on the head and so forth. And she is a divine huntress and warrioress. She protects and defends her offspring and her domain through fire. Her attacks are relentless until the threat is neutralized. So when you see lionesses, they hunt together. They are relentless until they rip apart the enemy. They defend the, pride as well and so forth. Lions defend the pride also, but you see the lionesses doing the majority of the hunting and so forth. And when you see the lioness on attack, they're relentless. They're fired up, they're relentless. So Bast takes on that same form as well. Now, when the male lion is not present, the female lionesses work together to hunt for food and kill the enemies, including hyenas, while protecting, nurturing, and rearing the offspring. They have no other choice. The Afuraitkaitnit woman will at times step outside of the role of Bast, manifest as the cat, and shift into the role of Bast, manifest as the lioness. Her affection, mediated by Bast through the shrine of Bast in her heart region, her unjuan jar pericardium, dictates that she protect, defend, nurture, and rear through coolness or fire as requisite circumstances demand. That's part of her affection. Affection is not just for being in a relationship, but you have an affection for your offspring, and you will kill for your offspring. So that's part of that affection, mediated by Bast. Her affection towards the Afurakani man can only be fully expressed when he is fully present and fully committed to his role in the growth, development, and defense of the Abusia, which is the family, and the Omain, which is the nation. Otherwise, she will strike out on her own and in the company of her sister lionesses to carve out a path of survival for themselves and their offspring. And this creates a strain on the nature of affection transmitted to the partially present and partially committed male, as it should. And it will continue to be strained until we restore our presence and commitments for the restoration and defense of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit families and our Omain, our nation. So we're talking about when there's an imbalance. Sometimes people will talk about, well, Black women have taken on a masculine energy and so forth because they have to do this and do that. It's not necessarily a masculine energy. They're talking about the increased fire. There are fire female divinities. There are fiery male divinities. Sekhmet is a fiery female divinity. She's the Arit Ra, the eye of Ra, operating through the right eye of Ra and so forth, which is the Aten, the sun and so forth. She's a fiery force. That doesn't make her a masculine force. There's a gradient. There are watery feminine forces, earthy, airy, fiery feminine forces, and they're all supremely feminine. There are male water divinities, male earth divinities, male atmospheric divinities, male fire divinities as well. So there's a gradient as well, and they're all supremely male. So there's balance. There's a male and female fire, expansion and contraction within fire, expansion and contraction within water, expansion and contraction within earth, expansion and contraction within the atmosphere and so forth. So, but sometimes there's an overemphasis on the fiery energy, that the heightened fiery energy increased at a sustained level that normally the woman wouldn't take on. She may expand that fire periodically in natural cycles and so forth, but because of, the lack of commitment of the person she connected with and so forth, then she has to expand that fire on a more consistent basis, on a more sustained level. And then it creates imbalance within her, it creates imbalance within the family because the male is imbalanced as well, and that creates imbalance within him and the family, and ultimately within the community as well. So this is why, once again, we talked about the stability that Bast provides as protecting the heart, but perpetuating and lubricating. So that protection on one hand, but the lubricating aspect to perpetuate that fusion and deal with the continuity of relationships, but also continuity of the community, of the nation. Some of our people, when we escape from enslavement, were guided by the Abosom, guided by the Orisha, the Vodou, and so forth, to escape, kill the slave masters, so-called slave masters, wife and staff and children and so forth, set the plantations on fire, escape, establish independent sovereign nations, independent black towns and so forth. That was the establishment of a new structure. But then it needed to be perpetuated. There needs to be a continuity of that, and Bast has to do with that continuity. She protects from outside invasion, but she lubricates so there can be a continuity of what was established, what was put together, what was that harmony, that beauty that we established by fashioning a brand new entity, a city, a village, a black town, and so forth. But it has to be perpetuated. So, and that perpetuation comes from nourishing what we built, but also protecting what we built. That's on a communal level, but also on a relationship level. And even on an individual level, when you're, purifying yourself, embracing and allowing Het Heru to show you manifest harmony. Beauty is manifest harmony. So if you're engaged in self-destructive thoughts, ugly behavior, discordant thoughts, discordant behavior, and so forth, Het Heru can show you what's quote unquote nefer, what is beautiful, but not just beautiful aesthetic, but what is in harmony. When you see something that's beautiful, it's simply an expression of divine order, ultimately. So if something is orderly, it's beautiful. If it's disorderly or disordered, it's quote unquote ugly or unattractive. Beauty or harmony or divine order attracts, disorder repels. So if something is unattractive or repulsive, that means it's out of harmony with order. So Het Heru, if you're engaged in self-destructive thoughts because of trauma that you've internalized and so forth, even if it was enacted upon you by other individuals and you're operating based on that trauma, you create discordant or quote unquote ugly thoughts, intentions, and eventually behaviors, and become self-destructive, and that affects others around you and so forth. When you reconnect with Het Heru, she will show you order. Manifest order is beauty. So she'll show you the nefer, or the beauty of how your relationship with yourself should be, the kind of thoughts you should have, how you should approach things, how you should look at things and so forth, the harmonious or beautiful way, and you'll incorporate that. You'll begin to heal yourself, and you'll no longer be self-destructive. You won't manifest self-destructive behaviors. And that's, good for the nation as well. So whether it's on an individual level, we connect with Het Heru, and then Bast perpetuates that beauty that that union, that, complementary beauty of relationships internally. Bast will help perpetuate that through time. We do that individually, we do that in relationships, we do that with regard to the nation. All right. So we say we do not merely seek affection mediated by Bast. As men, we don't simply seek affection mediated by Bast from the Afuraitkaitnit woman. We work to fulfill our divine function in creation as Afurakani men, African Black men. The provision of divine affection mediated by Bast naturally proceeds from this realignment with order, because realigning with order, we realign with the embodiments of divine order, the Abosom, the divinities, and so forth, including Bast and her vessels in the population, the Afuraitkaitnit woman. So Afurakani men are not just running around chasing women trying to get some energy from Bast, or you don't invoke Bast because you want to feel some affection from a woman and so forth. She's not participating in that. Just like Het Heru is not participating in any kind of attraction. You can have lustful attraction that's based on disorder, or you can have attraction that's based on order, based on the fact that this individual has an energetic configuration that matches and balances your energetic configuration. And that was true before you even incarnated in the world. And Het Heru guided your steps so you can cross paths and unite. That's a natural attraction. That's the only kind of attraction that she governs. She doesn't govern prostitution. She doesn't govern, perversity. She doesn't govern promiscuity. All these things that the white snarl spring and brainwashed Negroes would try to attach to Het Heru, Oshun, Erzuli, Afi, and so forth. She has nothing to do with any of that. If you're engaged in that, you just left Het Heru, Oshun alone. She only engages in the complementary fusion of balanced, ordered, opposite energy that was sanctioned by Amen and Amenet through the agency of Ma'ah and Ma'at, the male forces of divine law and balance. So in the same fashion, Bast governs affection, but you're not just trying to get some affection or some energy or some adoration from someone. If that's what you're seeking, it's not going to be dispensed to you. And sometimes the male will run around seeking affection, seeking some energy, an energetic release from a woman just to, satisfy a temporal urge and so forth. Bast doesn't participate in that. You don't receive the energy of Bast through that affection. It's not dispensed to you unless you engage in executing your divine function in the world. And once you execute your divine function in the world and get on that path, then naturally Bast releases or dispenses her energy of affection in that process. So that is a different approach to relationships. Now, we're going to go to part 4 of the series, but before we get to that, if you have any questions, of course, you can post them in the chat room. Or you can state the question, unmute yourself and state the question. But we're going to switch, same site, we're going to switch to part 4 of the series. Okay, so knowing, number 1, what her role in creation is, where her shrines are seated in the body, where they're seated on earth, where they're seated in the spirit body and so forth, how the bond by the divine living energy is expanded and contracted so we can connect with the forces in nature and we can utilize that energy to, execute our function. These are the different things that Bast, how she manifests. So we know who she is, we know we need to invoke her so we can receive that energy of affection and so forth. But then it comes to a question of, all right, how do you determine who your divine complement is? And even when we're looking at, and we've done an entire 6-week course called Ba'iti Seneb, Cosmology of Divine, Twin Flame, Marriage, and so forth. So we have, in fact, we have part 1 and part 2, 2 6-week courses, and we show the marriages of the deities, like Amen and Amenet, Ra and Ra'et, Atem and Asase Nebetetepet, Ptah and Sekhmet and Shu and Tefnut and so forth. The marriages of the divinities, Asar and Aset, Set and Nebetet, the marriages of the divinities, and when you look there, the role of the marriages of the divinities, and you see how they function harmoniously together, cosmologically, that is an indication or an example of how we are to function. We emulate the example of the divinities, the way they operate in harmony. So we did a whole 6-week course, part 1 as well as part 2 on that. So you can see that on our site. We talk about the Ba. So you have the Ba and Ba'et, but then Ba'iti. T means two or dual in Kemet. The dual T, Ba spirit. And that Ba spirit, as we have shown, is manifest as that flame or that solar fire and so forth. So it's the T, dual, flame, Ba spirit. So the twin flame spirit comes from the cosmology of ancient Kemet. And we have a 2 6-week courses on that where we go into detail about that, talking about the nature of the twin flame and all of that, as they manifest through the divinities and the whole story of the twin flame from Shu and Tefnut and that whole cosmology. So you can check those out. But people want to know, once we know who Bast is, what her role in creation is and how we are to relate to her, how do we determine who the individual is, who that person is? And this is why we have this power for the divination of affection. So, so this is a You'll see the person here seated before a shrine of Bast, giving offerings. This is a form of Bast, is the cat-headed divinity with the solar disc and so forth. And this is a votive sculpture, statue of her. Now, so when we talk about head, Ru, and Bast, that's attraction and affection, initiation and perpetuation of a complementary relationship. Now, and we said the fanning of the flames of the bond by spirit, increasing the fire within us, can manifest as harmonious aggression, the precursor to righteous warfare, or harmonious arousal. Harmonious aggression, we fan the flames. If someone tries to burn down our village or shoot our people down in the street like cops and so forth, we fan the flames of the Bast spirit. We generate that fire energy to kill our enemies, kill the cops, massacre the cops, kill the person who invaded the village, kill the person who tried to invade the home and so forth. That is harmonious aggression. That's the expression or impression of divine order. So divine order is comprised of an expansive pole and a contractive pole. All of creation is governed by divine order, manifests through divine order. The expansive pole of order is divine law. That is the expression of order, governed by Ma'ah and Ma'at, the male and female forces of divine law. So law expresses order. The laws that govern creation are expressing of order. And then you have Heru Bedeti and Sekhmet, or Benna and Abena, with the male and female forces of the contractive pole of divine order, which is divine hate. Hate is the contractive pole of order. Law is the expansive pole of order. Law and love is the same word in our ancestral language. So we have a book, Madanechi, and we'll just post this book up real quick, just so you can see it. So we have our book, Madanechi, Divine Law, Love, and Divine Hate, and we show that the male and female forces of law or love is Ma'ah and Ma'at. Remember, Het Heru deals with the sensual attraction, that's the precursor to procreative activity and the replenishment of its harmony. So some people associate that with love and sexuality or fertility, but she's the sensual attraction. She's the force that draws us together in complementary fusion. It's guided by law, quote unquote love, but she's that sensual attraction that fuses together opposites in a harmonious fashion. Fuses together colors in a harmonious fashion for a painting, fuses together sounds in a harmonious fashion for music, fuses together, shapes for sculptures and so forth, or movements for dance, or sounds for song and so forth. And then fuses together the Afurakani man and Afuraitkaitnit woman, and only the Afurakani man and Afuraitkaitnit woman. Interracialism is out of harmony with divine order. Of course, dissexuality, homosexuality is out of harmony with divine order. Only the Afurakani man, Afuraitkaitnit woman balance one another out. So she will only fuse together the Afurakani man and Afuraitkaitnit woman in complementary balance. That's that force. But love and law is the same word. In the Coptic dialect, the term for love is meh. In ancient Kemet, the late Kemet dialect that came into usage about 2,000 years ago, the word for love is meh, and the word for law is meh. And in fact, just so you can see that, for those who are unaware of or haven't seen the book before, so as you can see here, the term ma'ah means to be true, to be upright, truthful, veritable, real, actual. The Coptic version is meh. And then of course you have ma'at. So you have ma'ah and ma'at, the male and female forces of divine law and balance. The Coptic version instead of ma'ah is me'eh. That's just a dialectical variant. By the time we get to the Coptic era of Kemet, about 2,000 years ago, the dialect lexical variant of the term ma'a becomes me'eh or meh. As you can see in both versions, ma'a is meh. This is the M in the Coptic script, and this is the E in the Coptic script. So law is meh. And then you have the term mer or mar, which means to love, desire, wish for, crave, to will, and so forth. The Coptic dialect is meh. So the word for law is meh. The word for love is meh. And that's not only true phonetically, but it's also true cosmologically. To be in love with someone is to be in law with them. That means your interaction with them is reflective of divine order. That's in our culture. That's across the board, Afuraitkaitnit people across the board, wherever we exist on the continent or in the world. Law and love is the same word, same concept. It's always been. Even in English, the LV structure and LW, the W came into being a few hundred years ago. First there was a V, then there was a U a few hundred years later, and then it evolved into the double U. Two U's side by side or two V's side by side. So LV, which is love, and LW, which is law or law, V and W is the same term. This is why, or sound. So this is why you have in European languages, you have the interchange between the V and the W. Sweden is spelled with a W, but they'll pronounce it Sweden. William in English is Wilhelm, you know, in European languages and so forth. You'll even find that same interchange between the V sound and the W sound in Afurakani languages. You have Ovambo, the Ovambo people of Namibia and so forth, and Angola is pronounced Ovambo in certain dialects, and then Owambo with the W in other dialects. So the V and W interchange, just like they interchange in European languages because they learned the script and the sound from us anyway. So LV, love, and LW, law, is the same, even phonetically is the same term. But cosmologically and phonetically in ancient Kemet, meh, law, meh, love. That is the expansive pole of order, the expression of order. That is what divine law or love is. So if you're in love with someone, that means you're in law with them. That means your interactions with them are reflective of divine order. That's what law or love actually is. The whites and their offspring conflate lust, misguided desire, with love. And they'll say, well, I fell in love with somebody, I fell out of love with somebody. That's nonsense. Now, to go a little bit further, just to show that why that's not accurate, as you can see here, first and foremost, Ma'a is the God of law, order, truth, integrity. That's the male deity of divine law and balance. And Ma'at is the female divinity of divine law and balance. We did a 6-week course on the male deity Ma'a, the counterpart of Ma'at, to prove that he exists. He exists in the Akhan tradition, he exists in Yoruba tradition, he exists in the Vodun tradition, of course in ancient Kemet. He's the male divinity of divine law and balance. Just like you have to have your heart weighed against the feather of Ma'at in ancient Kemet in the cosmology, of course when we transition, after that judgment scene and you pass that test, then you have to go through an extensive interrogatory with the god Ma'a, the Ntorot or the Ntorot, Neter Ntorot Ma'a, in order to go to the ancestral realm. You have to pass his test after you pass Ma'at's test. So Ma'a and Ma'at, male and female forces of divine law, the expansive pole of order, truly the male and female forces of divine love or law, first and foremost, they are deities. So we don't fall in love, we fall in law. We don't fall in Ma'at and fall out of them. They are deities. So that whole notion of falling in love, falling out of love, that has to do with the whites and their offspring promoting lust. You can fall in and out of lust, but you're not falling in and out of law. So this is why we have our book. And then we also show that the term we show that the term hate comes from our language as well, does not come from the white neural spring. So when you look at the etymology of the term hate, they'll talk about it comes from akedos in Greek and ket in the Proto-Indo-European language phylum, and ket means to break or destroy or destruction. And we'll just pull this up real quick. So you can see hate in English, Proto-Indo-European etymon, ket, akedos in Greek, hepta in North Germanic, to hate, damage, destroy, ket in Tocharian, destruction. So Proto-Indo-European language phylum or family is the origin of the Indo-European languages going back a few thousand years. And Greek and Germanic and all that, are born of that group language family. But ket, meaning destruction, actually does not come from the European languages. And that's very important because when Bast is being, a warrioress and destroying disorder and repelling disordered spirits and killing the enemy and so forth, that's a divine function. If ket means destruction or to destroy, you'll find that ket in Ejikamet means to strike, to trample upon, to vanquish, to suppress, to subdue, to batter down, to beat small, to crush, het, heta, to break, to tear up, to demolish. And then you have the other version with the KH, which is ket, the same as ket in Tocharian, the Proto-Indo-European language family. Ket, to break, to cut in pieces, to root up, to destroy, ket and ken and so forth. That is the origin of the term. But it's also and here's another version, kaet, the same kat or ket in the Proto-Indo-European language phylum, to destroy. You have kaet and kai, to slay, defeat, overthrow, to slaughter, massacre, ruin. Kaitu or Keitu or Heitu are the gods who slaughter the enemies of Ra and Al-Sar. And you also have Heru, Heti, Ket. Heru, the chief of Ket or destruction. That's Heru, the chief of hate. And Heru, Keti, Heru, the chief of hate. The flying winged sun disk, which is Heru Behudet, is Heti and so forth. This is what we're talking about. So your immune system and lymphatic systems, they're the forces that destroy disorder to preserve the maintenance of your organism. They are the Het vehicles within your body. Heru Bedeti and Sekhmet become Bina and Abina and Akhan, and Ogun and Iyami Abini in Yoruba, and Ogu and Inyokwe Ananu and Vodun. These are the male and female forces that are the contractive forces that destroy disorder for the purpose of maintaining the integrity of divine order. They're the divine forces of divine hate. Creation unfolds according to law, and it is sustained and protected through divine hate or divine destruction. So law or love and hate are two poles, expansive and contractive, expressive and impressive, of divine order. So that is critical to understand when we're talking about the functioning of different divinities. And we go back to Bast. We're talking about fanning the flames of the Ba, the Ba'at spirit, that solar fire within you. Increasing the fire can manifest as harmonious aggression. That's the precursor to righteous warfare, as we said. Waging war against our enemies who are creating disorder. We restore balance, just like your immune system cells swim through the bloodstream so they can kill the enemy. They don't sing kumbaya with the enemy. They don't turn the other cheek with the enemy, with the cancer cells. They kill them, and they're directed to kill them by the body, by the supreme being. Heru Behudet and Sekhmet and Bast and different divinities, Wachet and so forth, being directed to kill the enemy through the agency of our immune system, lymphatic system, and so forth, as well as in the communal body, when you have people who are engaged in martial arts and military, structures and so forth within our communities to kill the enemy. We're guided by the divinities of divine hate, and that's sacred. So harmonious aggression, but we also have harmonious arousal. You can be aroused harmoniously, generating fire can be for aggression or for arousal, harmonious arousal. Not lustful arousal, but harmonious arousal. So, when that fanning of the flames manifests as harmonious arousal, the flames of the Ba'bayat spirit provoke the energy of Het Heru for fusion with our complement and provoke the energy of Bast to dispense affection for the perpetuation of that initiatory fusion. So when we stimulate the Ba and Bayat through ritual practice, we engage in pouring libation, we engage in ritual song, ritual drumming, ritual dance, ritual chant, ritual prayer, and so forth. We begin to fan the flames of our spirit, our Ba, our Bayat. That energy begins to expand, that fire energy expands. There's a bridge of that energy that connects out to one of the divinities and connects with their Ba or Bayat energy. There's a bridge of energy that's connected. Then they travel that bridge to possess us through spirit possession, or simply to communicate with us and open our eyes so we can see what we need to see and make the right decisions and receive the proper direction. So when we fan the flames of the Ba and Bayat spirit to provoke the energy of Het Heru, we send that energy out and provoke or push or provoke the energy of Het Heru. Just like a child pulls on the breast of the mother and then the milk is released. We send that energy out and provoke the energy of Het Heru, and then her energy is dispensed to us. It's released through ritual invocation, expansion of the Ba Bayat energy, and so forth. We provoke her energy, and she bathes us with her energy so we can be moved to the right individual and fuse with the right individual. Fusion of complementary opposites. Then we project our energy, our Ba and Bayat energy, to Bast, and she dispenses her energy of affection. So once we fuse with the right person, then that fusion is perpetuated through time, because through affection, because Bast has mediated that perpetuation through affection. Now, as we said, sometimes arousal is not harmonious, and that's where the problem comes in. That's when people get, confused about who they should be with and who they should not be with. So, harmonious arousal is predicated upon the individual following the direction of his or her Kayat, the Okra, Okrawa, the Ori Inu, the inner spiritual head, and so forth. As we said, inscribed within the head, the spiritual head is the function you are to execute in creation. That includes your, what we call Unkra and Krabiya and Akhan, your divine function to execute who you are to be in the world and so forth. That includes who your balance is, the kind of individual you need to balance with. And of course, that is written into their nature and your nature before you incarnate into the womb. So you just need to be moved in position and placed on that right path. So when you align with the forces in nature, align with the divinity in the head region, and the Abosom connected to you, the Orisha connected to you, they will position you to cross paths with the right individual. Now, so that's what we're talking about in that particular section. Now, just as every cell in the body is designed to execute a specific function within your body, within the organ or system of which is a component part, so are we, as Afurakani people, we're cells within the great divine body of Amenet and Amen. We execute specific functions. Our functions are interdependent upon one another. Certain cells thus naturally complement one another. Certain cells operate in harmony with one another closely. They are designed to function harmoniously with one another in a close, balanced, symbiotic relationship. Now, of course, the Afurakani man, Afuraitkaitnit woman complement one another exclusively. White Arabs, white Hispanics, white pseudo-Native Americans, white Europeans, white Arabs, white, Americans, whatever it is, non-Black people they incarnated spirits of disorder, meaning they do not have a Ka or Kayet, they do not have a Ba or Bayet. It's impossible for them to balance us in any way. They will only bring disorder, discordance to us. We have no natural attraction to anyone outside of our own natural ethnic group. Spirits of disorder are repulsive before they even begin to speak. So, and there is no exception to that reality. Never has been, never will be. Just like cancerous cells are not, in harmony with healthy cells. It's not like, well, most of the cancerous cells are good or bad, but there are a few of them that we can work with. Cancerous cells by nature are cancerous cells, meaning they are disordered or discordant, and they are only slated for eradication and expulsion from the body. The cells do not seek to embrace them. So the divine response is the immune and lymphatic system to exterminate them. Now, disorder is not the complement of order. It is the perversion of order. There's no exception to that reality. So we go into some detail about that. There's no such thing as Het Heru pulling or Oshun pulling together people in dissexual homosexual relationships, interracial relationships, or relationships that are imbalanced where one person is so much older than the other person and so forth, lusting after somebody who's younger and trying to pretend like Oshun brought them together and so forth. That's not what's happening. So we talk about that in this section. We don't have to go through every piece there, but so we say when we attune to the divinity in the head region, the Ka or Kayet, we attune to our divine function in creation. We stimulate our Ba, the spirit, to energize the design, the plan, the function contained within our Ka and Kayet. Just like the energy within your bloodstream stimulates the brain, the energy within the Bayet, that radiant energy stimulates the function that we have, that divine plan we have in our spirit's brain and so forth, so we can activate that and actualize it and embrace it and live it. So when we come in contact with our harmonious complement, the stimulation of the energy of the Bayet spirit, the fanning of the flames of arousal, is a provocation of Het Heru, who facilitates fusion, as we said earlier, with our complement through attraction, and a provocation of Bast, who facilitates affection, the perpetuation of the harmonious fusion. So that's the mechanics of how that takes place. The Ba provokes, we fan the flames of the Ba, it provokes the energy of Het Heru and Bast and so forth for attraction and affection, fusion and perpetuation of fusion and so forth. But we must do that in alignment with what the plan, the divine function written into our nature, written into our soul, the divinity in the head region, the spirit's brain, has laid out for us. How do we know which individual is our harmonious complement? How do we determine whether or not the arousal we experience is a harmonious arousal or a misguided desire, lust, or conditioning? This is the domain of Adebisa, which is the Akhan term for divination. Bisa means to ask or to inquire. And Ade or Adie means thing, object, deed, or entity. So Adebisa means that thing, object, deed, or entity, Adie, which is Bisa, inquired about. So anytime we inquire or we project or provoke through thought, what do I need to know? What should I be doing? How should I be operating? What is out of harmony with order and so forth? That projection of an inquiry, that is Bisa, that is inquiry, that is a form of divination. So when we inquire of the Abosom, Orisha Vodu, Ntorotu, Ntoro, the divinities, the Nananoman Samanfo, Egugun, Kuvito, the Aku Akutu, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, anytime on any subject, any issue and so forth, we are engaged in an oracular function. There are different forms of divination. Some people use shells, some people use water, some people use mirrors, some people use different things and so forth. Anytime you engage in some form of inquiry, that is a form of oracular communication. Now, when we're inquiring of or divining with the Ka at the soul, the divinity in the head region, concerning the focus of our affection, Bast participates in the process. This is one of the reasons we feel a surge of energy in the heart region when we contemplate our harmonious complement, because it's stimulating the pericardium, the pericardial sac, the shrine of Bast within the body. This is the unju and jar of Bast, the pericardium, lubricating the heart, promoting affection, as the flames of the Ba-Bayat spirit fire as arousal are fanned. This is why we see the individual in the image kneeling before the shrine of Bast and giving ritual offerings. And that is this image to the left, giving ritual offerings to this great statue of Bast and so forth. We're invoking Bast to determine and understand and inquire about the divine complement and the nature of the relationship and what direction we need to go and so forth. But what you also find is this sculpture, Bast, this is an image of an X-ray of a Bast sculpture. And inside of the sculpture, through the X-ray, what they found was a mummified body of a cat. And they began to look through various sculptures of Bast, and they found mummified cats inside of these sculptures. That's why they did the X-ray here to find that. So, and so we say sometimes the mummified body, the shrine of a cat, was placed therein as shown in the X-ray of the statue. That physical vessel of the cat, which was a shrine, a living shrine of Bast and so forth, is a powerful magnet for that energy. So they would mummify a cat, just like when our bodies are mummified and so forth. The purpose of mummification, the whites and our offspring are unaware. They think we're just preserving the body as a relic and so forth, or as something as a symbol of remembrance. What we're doing when we mummify the body is we're crystallizing the body. We're turning the body into a crystal. And once it becomes crystallized, it becomes the greatest magnet for the spirit that is now an ancestral spirit that used to inhabit the body. So once it becomes crystallized through the mummification process, we have a huge crystal that's directly resonant at the frequency of the energy of the ancestral spirit who used to live in that body, and it becomes the greatest magnet. So that's what the purpose of mummification is. And in the hoodoo tradition and voodoo tradition and juju tradition and so forth in North America, we continue that process by drying out the bodies of lizards, or drying out the body of a dragonfly or a moth, or baby crocodile, or whatever it is, a snake or whatever it is, and we'll use that dried out body on our shrines in the hoodoo tradition, which is Akhan ancestral religion in North America, or the hoodoo or voodoo tradition, or juju and gengang or wanga and so forth. And that dried out body becomes a magnet for the energy of the divinity who has that entity as their sacred achinibwa or animal totem, so it's more resonant and so forth, a means of communication. So, but the key is inquiry through divination is that means by which we learn who the divine complement is, or confirm that, and learn what steps to take. Now, if we don't, the next piece is we say when one does not have an access to a diviner, consistent invocation of the Ka, the Ka'at, the Arit Ra, the divinity in the head region, and Bast, when you're pouring libation, or when you're engaged in the Susuho in our Akhan tradition, which is meditative process and so forth, invocation of the divinity in your head, your Ka, your Ka'at, your Arit Ra, as well as Bast herself by name, is key to discovering and confirming who is the proper focus of our affection, who is our harmonious complement. We must recall that this information is already encoded within our own Ka and Ka'at before we even enter into the world. Before you enter into the world, you have a function to execute. Your complement had a function to execute. You're sent into the world and so forth. Your energy configuration has already been coded within you. So you need to access that through your Ka, the soul, the divine consciousness. And then we go into some more, things dealing with, there's no rush about that. We make these inquiries, the Abosom and Nsamanfo. It will show us over time, confirmation after confirmation throughout the course of everyday life. They'll give you multiple confirmations, so you're not wondering, like, did I hear this message? Did I feel this? Did I, is this the person and so forth. They'll give you multiple confirmations over time throughout days and weeks and months and so forth. So you're sure, you're firm in your understanding. Now, but that also has to do with consistency with regard to ritual. If you go to, we always say, if you go to the health club once, once a week, you may exercise and may feel fine, but you're not going to see any gains. If you go every single day for, 8 months, then you're going to see development, you're going to see definition, you're going to see an increase in musculature and so forth, and stamina and everything else. But if you're going inconsistently 2 days, 1 week, then you wait 2 weeks and go 3 days, and then wait another week and go 2 days, and then wait another 4 weeks and go 1 day, and wait another month and go a whole week, you're not going to see any gains. If you're going to the ancestral shrine inconsistently, then you'll hear some things sometimes, you'll see some things sometimes, but that capacity for discerning the differences between what kind of spirit is communicating, it is an ancestral spirit, an unrelated spirit that you shouldn't be communicating with. Is it a divinity? Which divinity is it? What are they saying and so forth? The more consistent you are, you'll be able to determine the difference or distinguish the difference between what nature of spirits are communicating, when your Ka or Kaida is communicating, the nature of the Bast spirit and so forth, because you will have experience. Just like someone with a child, a newborn child, when they first hear the child crying, every time they hear the child crying, they just hear the child crying. The more nuanced you become in your understanding and your experience with the child, then one cries for food, they're hungry. Another cries for they need to be changed. Another cries because they're in pain. Another cries because they're sleepy and so forth. So you can determine the difference, discern the difference between the nature of the cry because you're more in tune with the child because of experience, consistent experience. The same is true with your spiritual receptivity. The more consistent you are with your spiritual work, the more in tune you become, and then more aligned you become, and you can discern the difference between, is this an ancestral spirit or a divinity? Is it one of the Nsamanfo or one of the Aboson, one of the Egungun or Orisha? If it's one of the Nsamanfo or ancestral spirits, is it a relative or a non-relative? If it's a relative, is it a spiritually cultivated relative who I should be getting advice from, or an uncultivated relative who gives bad advice? They gave bad advice when they were on earth, and they're still giving bad advice now, who you shouldn't be listening to. So the more consistent you are, the more you'll be in tune. So, and we say it's, of course, our responsibility to engage that process. Now, okay, it's already 1:02, but I do want to touch on the most recent articles on Bast that we did. These first four, this parts 1, 2, 3, and 4, we did 3 years ago. Parts 5 and 6, we just released over the past couple of weeks. And of course, if there are any questions in the chat room, you can post a question. All right. Now, this is part 5, this is brand new. So if you look at the image, here you have Bast and her protective as well as nurturing function. So she has the protective function, just like the pericardium, of course, protecting from infection, but also nurturing, lubricating or nurturing the sovereign, the king, and so forth, the Ensu. You see her here. So, but she has a couple of titles. Nebet Neser, that's a title which means the Lady of Flame. Neb or Nebet means lady or mistress, masteress, and so forth. And you see the Neser. In this context, you see the determinative of the brazier with the fire and the smoke, coming out and bending over and so forth. So that's the brazier with the flame and so forth. So Nebet Neser is the mistress or chiefess or lady of the flame. But that Neser is spelled with this symbol, which is actually the Nes symbol, which is the symbol for the tongue, and it's actually the tongue from the side view and so forth. If you look inside biologically and so forth, it's the symbol of the tongue. So the root of Neser, the way it's spelled, and you see the symbol for the tongue here, but it's also the flame. But the root is Nes, meaning tongue. Then you have Nes, reduplicated, to chop, to mince, to cut up into small pieces. Nes, meaning sword, knife, a thin blade. Neser, meaning flame or fire. But Neser also meaning to eat or to consume, but also meaning to consider, to ponder. When you consume something, ingest something mentally, that's similar to eating and so forth, consumption, mental consumption. So we say power 5 is the dual power of the tongue within the Afuraitkaitnit, the African, the Black woman. All right, so the term for tongue in the ancestral language is Nes, as we said. Now, the tongue is often said to be the sword of the Afuraitkaitnit, African Black woman. And some people say, well, her tongue is her sword and she'll cut you up and so forth. That's the power of the woman. Now, of course, women have a bayat. We just talked about the divine living energy, which is the spirit, the bayat for women. So that's the radiant energy filling up their entire spirit body. Of course, that's the divine power. It can be channeled through the tongue, but the tongue is not just the power. It's not just, related or relegated to that. But when they talk about the tongue, there's a sword and all of that, as we just saw in ancient Canadian Kemet, the word Nes, meaning tongue, Nes, to chop, mince, cut up in small pieces, sword, knife, a thin blade. Also flame or fire. So that saying does not come from Europeans, it comes from literally our language and cosmology. Here's the cosmological piece. Sound vibrations stimulate the eardrums. Those vibrations stimulate the eardrums, neurons, and affect brain and behavior. Even on a mundane level, sound vibrations, at a certain pitch and volume can cause glass to break and so forth. So it can make a hard substance like glass break sound vibrations. Then what are they doing when they stimulate your eardrums, stimulate neurons, affect your brains and behavior, cause triggers and so forth, trigger different thoughts, ideas, behaviors, and so forth? Sound vibrations have that capacity. So they stimulate the eardrums, neurons, and affect the brain and behavior. Effective speech can generate images as matrices in the spirit mind of the individual, which magnetically draw different individuals or entities into the orbit of the hearer, thereby influencing events. Here we have Ptah and Bast working together. Ptah is the fashioner of forms. And when you're talking about sound vibrations, effective speech, generating images, once an image is generated, think about when you're sleeping, you're in a dark room, there's no sound, no light, no movement and so forth, but you're interacting with luminous, colorful images, entities, and so forth. You're generating those images, and sometimes your spirit is communicating with and traveling. But just like during the sleep state, you can generate images. During the meditative state, or even sitting up, daydreaming and so forth, you can generate images in your mind. But those images become matrices. They become wombs and so forth that have power. Just like the earth, just like any other planet or any celestial body has a magnetic, gravitational pull and so forth, and they can draw smaller entities into their orbit. The earth draws the moon into its orbit. The planets are in the orbit of the sun and so forth. When you generate an image, a colorful image, it has colors. That means there are different centers of, frequency, waves and rates and so forth that generate different colors. When you have an image, It is a matrix. It's a womb. It has a gravitational field. It has a magnetic field, and it can draw other entities to it. Ptah fashions the form of that specific matrix. Bast gives energy to it, and now it's a womb, and your ideas pull in individuals and entities. When people talk about, your thoughts create reality and so forth, sometimes people go overboard with that. It's more than just thinking about something and it happens, because of course every thought you have doesn't come into existence. But when you generate thoughts, they generate a magnetic field and they draw certain individuals and entities to them. That's why we have to be careful about what we're thinking about, because you can draw individuals. You can also repel individuals and entities as well. So these are matrices. It draws people into the orbit. And then once you're drawn into that orbit, it influences individuals, and therefore events are influenced. It influences people's behavior. You generate a certain idea. For example, we use this in the other article, just on a lower level. You can have a friend that you haven't spoken to in 6 years, and you begin to think about that individual, and you generate an image of the individual. The magnetic field is born around the image. It begins to draw and pull on that individual because you have their image in your spirit, quote unquote mind, but in your spirit and so forth. So you begin to draw that individual into your orbit, and then a minute later the phone rings, you pick up the phone and it's the person, and you haven't talked to them in 5 years. So you say, hey, I was just thinking about you. So what you did was you influenced them, you projected energy towards them by generating that image, creating a magnetic field, and began to draw on them. Now, depending on how receptive someone is, they'll either be influenced and pulled along, or they could resist the influence if they wanted to, but there will be some form of influence. Now, said matrices, these energetic wombs, can also affect the spirit body of the hearer, thereby influencing the hearer to be drawn to and engage in certain behaviors. Moreover, the function of a flame is not only destructive, but purificatory. Bast in her form is Nebet Neset, the Lady of Flame, or the Mistress of Flame, or the Masteress of Flame. She can be a warrioress divinity, yet also one who purifies through the same flame. You can use fire to destroy something, or you can use fire to burn away impurities, so only the strongest, most solid aspect is still standing. To purify or burn away the debris, so only what is pure is left. So the term Neser is defined as flame and fire, yet also to consider and to ponder. So, and we said the curved medut of the tongue is found in each term. So the tongue is also the sword, the knife, and so forth, but it's also the flame. The focus on the tongue of the woman as a sword is often used to infer that it is best that the woman be silenced. Her speech should be suppressed or avoided. And this is not our culture. Like, oh, the woman's tongue can be a sword, so you don't want to anger her and so forth. That means you want to suppress her. You don't want her to express her tongue as the flame or the fire. But that's actually expressing an aspect of a deity of Bast. So you're trying to suppress her alignment with the divinity because it makes you feel uncomfortable. But we learned that from the whites and their offspring. Yet our language and cosmology proves different. So as we talked about Bast governing the pericardium and so forth, Het Ra deals with the attraction and Bast with the affection. Mentally, so if Het Ra, she's also called Nefer, which means beauty. Once again, we talked about Nefer, or beauty, in the true sense, is the revelation of divine harmony. So if things are in divine order, creation is orderly, moving in ordered patterns and so forth. If you said draw a picture of order, that's a concept, governed by divinities and so forth. But if you see something that's harmonious, or you hear something harmonious and so forth, that is an expression of order. Because if it was disharmonious, that would be disorder. But if it's harmonious, then it's an expression of order. And beauty is just a revelation of that harmony. So Nefert is actually a title of Het Heru. She is sometimes called Nefer. She is not the goddess of beauty, but she is the goddess beauty. Beauty herself is a divinity. Nefer is the divinity. So mentally, the entrancing Nefer, the entrancing beauty, the revelation of divine harmony of the consciousness of Het Heru motivates the Afurakani man to connect with the Afuraitkaitnit woman. So the energy of Het Heru, she's the goddess Nefer beauty. Her energy motivates or stimulates, motivates us. It's like a magnet pulling another magnet across the table and so forth. We come in contact and provoke the energy of Het Heru. It begins to motivate us. It stimulates our Ba as Afurakani men, that fiery force, that radiant force. It stimulates us or motivates us through harmony to connect with the Afuraitkaitnit woman. Yet that connection is perpetuated through the purity of the consciousness of Bast. It has to be purification involved. You connect with the right individual through Het Heru, not through lust, but you invoke Het Heru and she will connect you with the right individual. Not someone who seems like they're the right individual, or on paper they seem like a nice person, or I haven't met anybody in a number of years that seem like the right person, so I might as well go ahead and get with this person. We're not talking about that. Het Heru will connect you with the person whose energetic configuration balances yours out, and yours balances theirs out. Het Heru connects you with the person whose function in creation is in harmony with your function in creation. So that's the fusion. That's the connection. But it's perpetuated through the purity of the consciousness of Bast. Through her tongue is Nebet Nesert, the Afuraitkaitnit woman's expressed intelligence and brilliance, because remember, Neser also means to consider or to ponder. To eat, but that means to consume, to digest, to ingest, consider, or ponder. And of course, with regard to our people, we're only considering that which is, messages from the divine and so forth. Through her tongue, Nes, the Afuraitkaitnit woman's expressed intelligence and brilliance, the Afurakani man remains entranced forever. Through the purity of Bast, you get connected with Het Heru. That connection is perpetuated through Bast, but it's through purification. You see here, Bast is lubricating or milking, so this is a spirit. So when you see a king standing next to a divinity, and they're saying, oh, well, why is this grown man suckling at the breast of a woman? Okay, this is Bast. That means this is a divinity. That means this is a deity. That means this is an invisible spirit force in creation, a female force. Now, if you're clairvoyant, you can see the feminine force. You can see the masculine force. People who are clairvoyant, whether they're children or adults, when a spirit possesses, they can see the spirit standing there. But if you're not clairvoyant, you can see that. But if you're trying to depict someone being nourished by the energy of a female divinity, you're going to have to draw the picture of a female divinity. But it doesn't mean that the man is standing there suckling on the breast of a woman standing next to him and is some kind of perverted thing. That is a spiritual force. She has the head of a lioness. That's a spirit force, an invisible force that's nourishing or lubricating or projecting her energy or dispensing her energy so the man can be fed on it. That's a purificatory function. So that's what we're saying. The purity, she purifies, and therefore the perpetuation of that fused connection can continue. Through her tongue, the Afuraitkaitnit woman's expressed intelligence and brilliance, meaning she's aligning her thoughts and her communication with what is in harmony with divine order. It's expressed as intelligence and brilliance. The Afurakani man remains entranced forever. So through Bast, the perpetuation of the fusion, through affection, the reason he's maintained forever, when she purifies through the tongue, when she speaks through the flame, Neser of the tongue, Nes through contemplation or pondering and so forth on divine order, and speaks through expressed intelligence and brilliance. The Afurakani man is entranced forever. That fusion is perpetuated. The only way the fusion is broken is if the man or the woman or both start engaging in disordered behavior and they reject Bast and reject Heru and so forth and move in a different direction. But as long as the woman is in alignment with Bast, what she speaks and what she expresses, her tongue is going to be a flame for purification and affection. And that entrances the man and he remains connected. And there's no notion of infidelity and all that nonsense. Now, in our Akhan culture, it's said that the okra, which is one of the terms for cat, the other term is meow and so forth, but one of the terms for cat is okra. It is the same term for soul, which is okra. So that's why it's the lowercase, uppercase. It is said that the cat, the okra, is like the soul, okra, because it abhors filth. You see the cat constantly using her tongue to clean herself and so forth to maintain or perpetuate purity. So this is why in Akhan, ancestral culture, they look at the cat, they'll call the cat okra because it's constantly purifying itself. They'll call the cat, hey, that cat is like a little soul, a divine consciousness, because it's constantly purifying itself and remaining pure. The ka, the soul, the divine consciousness, the divinity in the head region is always pure. So the cat abhors filth. Bast as Nebet Neser, the mistress of the flame or the lady of the flame and so forth. She's using the tongue to purify, to cleanse, express divine order, intelligence, and brilliance, but also to purify and cleanse. That's what the Nebet Neser, or the tongue, expresses. It expresses the beautiful mind, infinite intelligence of the Afuraitkaitnit woman. So the beauty attracts, Heru attracts, but that intelligence sustains. The intelligence sustains because Bast, through purification, utilizing the tongue as the flame of fire and purity, purifies just like the cat is purifying itself all the time, purifies that connection that we made through Heru, and that beauty attracts, intelligence sustains. So the tongue of the Afuraitkaitnit woman is more than a sword. It is an instrument which captures the mind of the Afurakani man. So that goes into this notion of, this whole notion of infidelity and how we easily avoid infidelity. Okay, so there was I'm gonna go to the chat room real quick. Okay, so we have, there's a question about ritual head cleaning and so forth. So if you look in our couple of things, the question was about daily head washing for alignment and so forth. So we're gonna pull up, first we'll do it this way. Okay, so this is one of the pages on our website. This is the Nhoma page on our website, Odwirafo.com. And we have 31 books to date. All the ebook versions of our 31 books are free downloads, so you can download all 31 books for free. We also sell the softcover versions. They range between $8 and $11, but the ebook versions are free. So, but one of them is the book, the Okra Complex, The Soul of Akhan Fo. And it's dealing with the nature of the Ka-Kayat. In Akhan, it's called the Okra for males, Okra for females. Ancient Kemet is the Ka-Kayat, in Yoruba is the Odori Nu. In Vodun is the Selido, the divinity in the head region. And when you go through that book, when you get to near the end, we're talking about the Akra Guade, or soul washing, and different ethnic groups do things, based on their culture. Similar, but slightly different. It just depends on the culture and so forth. But we talk about that starting on page 46, Akra Guade. which is dealing with soul washing, purifying the head. But basically, so in that book, so you can download that book for free, the Akra complex on our page, and start going through that information. You want to go through the whole book, so by the time you get to the Akra Guade, you understand, what's going on. Basically, going to either a river or using a vessel, praying into the water to specific divinities, including your Krawa, and using that water to cleanse the head. Just like you take regular water to cleanse the debris off your head, you charge the water through ritual invocation, invoking the divinity there, and then you use that charged water to pull the negative spiritual debris off of your head, just like you would take the cloth and water to, wipe and cleanse the physical debris off of your head. And once you do that, then you sit down and listen, because you'll be more receptive, you'll be more clear without these distractions and so forth. But in that particular book, and then we also have, with regard to ritual in general, including that particular ritual, but others as well. This is the Akhan Wasuya page on our website, where we have our online courses. And you'll see that we have, these are just the flyers for all the different 19 courses we've done, and these are the, the large flyers for that. But we have Hoodoo parts 1, 2, 3, and 4. And just so you can see, so this was the Hoodoo part part 3, and that's dealing with ritual. So it's a 6-week course dealing with ritual. So the rituals addressed is Afurakani, which is offerings, Oshuye, which is libation, Achinebois, animal totems, Asumai, which is talismans, ritual use of these things, Adebisa, which is divination, and Seso, which is idols, and so forth, Nkombre, which is shrines, and more. So in that particular course, we're talking about the nature of ritual and basic ritual for those things. All of these courses, the archives exist. So the archives for that 6-week course exists. You can obtain any one of these courses. Out of the 19 courses, 15 of them, or 16 of them are 6-week courses, and 3 of them are 4-week courses. So, and for the 6-week courses, the regular 6-week course live is $30 for 6 weeks, but the archives are half that price, so it's $15 for the 6-week course. So when you go to the page here, you'll see that right up under this image with all of the courses, you'll see the pull down menus. So for example, you see Hoodoo Part 1, Part 2, here's Part 3, and that's 6 weeks for 15, and we'll send you the links to all 6 weeks, all 6 class sessions, the links and the passwords, for all 6 class sessions. So that's just going into more detail about ritual and so forth, but the Okra complex book deals with the Akra Guade, or soul washing, head washing ceremony or ritual. Okay, so one more piece and we'll be done. We just want to address the latest, most recent installment of the Bast series that we just published just a number of days ago. So that's Bast Eye of the Moon, preserving fidelity in relationships. And what we have here, of course, we have the moon, we have an actual cat and so forth. This is Merit and Maya, who were around the new empire of ancient Kemet and so forth, husband and wife. This is a symbol for the heart and the Unju and Jar, so that's also a symbol for the heart and the pericardium and so forth. And of course, this is Bast. Now, So we talk about, once again, the relationship between Arit Ra and Bast and so forth. But it is Bast through her agency and function of affection who establishes fidelity in relationships. For fidelity is the revelation of divine affection, because affection is the perpetuation of the fusion that was initiated by Arit Ra through attraction, and then Bast perpetuates that fusion through affection. So you have continuous affection for the person that you united with. Arit Ra brought you together, and your affection for that person develops, and it continues for 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years and so forth, and marriage and so forth. That fidelity is the revelation of divine affection. As long as Bast's energy is there and constantly invoked and so forth and dispensed, then fidelity is a manifestation of that. So, and it's not this notion of, it's difficult to maintain, fidelity in relationships, and it's so hard and all this other nonsense. That's white culture, and they want to impute that within us, but it's not true. So looking at the mechanics of it, we have a better understanding of it. And of course, when you engage in self-development, just like you learn how to control your appetite, you can control your, arousal. And we talked about harmonious arousal through the fanning of the flames of the ba and bayat and so forth. When you're dealing with your ba and bayat, when you engage in your spiritual work through ritual, invocation, whether you're engaged in libation, going to your ancestral shrine, ritual song, ritual dance, ritual prayer, ritual chant, whatever form of ritual or combination you're doing, you're constantly engaged in the purificatory process, no different than exercising every day and so forth. So you can regulate your energy, and you have control over that. You can wield that, and you're not controlled by lower level temptation. So we want to understand to a greater degree the mechanics of that. So Bast can take the totemic form of a lioness or that of a meow or a cat. She is referenced as the Arit Ra, the Eye of Ra. In our ancestral cosmology, Ra is the creator of the universe. Hold on one second. Okay, so Ra is the creator of the universe. Ra is the creatress of the universe. The right eye of Ra is the Aten, the sun, while the left eye of Ra is the Yat, which is the moon. Yat or Yat is the moon. So, Bast in her totemic form of the divine meow or cat is the Arit Ra, specifically the Arit Abet, the left Abet, eye, Arit of Ra, or the Yat, the moon. And just so you understand, we go down, we did a little, what we say here, and this is why we have this asterisk, the male deity of the sun is the Aten, the female deity of the sun is Atenit. These are divinities. Different deities will possess, through spirit possession, possess the Aten, the Atenit, the sun, and use the sun to transmit their energy. Just like a spirit can possess us, in the Hoodoo tradition, when spirit possession occurs, someone's dancing and spirit possesses them and communicates with the people and lays hands and so forth. In any tradition that we have, ritual, ancestral tradition, spirit possession takes place. The Abosom, the Orisha, the Vodou don't only possess us, they will possess the sun, possess the moon, possess the planets and so forth, and utilize them to transmit their energy. When deities possess the sun, they transmit energy. Possess the moon, they transmit their energy through that lunar orb, through that lunar medium. So the Aten or Atenit is the sun, and different deities will possess and utilize it. The moon is Ya. The female divinity of the moon is Yat or Yat. Spirit possession occurs with that as well. So some people assume that there's just a male deity of the moon, Ya, but there's also Yat. Some people just assume there's a male divinity of the sun, Aten, but there's also Atenit. So when she's operating through the left eye of the moon, which is the left eye of Ra, which is the moon, conversely, in the form of the divine cat, in the form of the divine lioness, that totemic form, she's the Arit Ra, or the right Amit, eye of Ra, which is the Atanit, which is the sun. Now, in the coffin text from the Middle Empire of Kemet, it is conveyed that Bast is the firstborn daughter of the divinity Atem. She is our protection until the day dawns. So that's in the coffin text. Atem is shown in the red setting sun. When the sun sets and then goes into the quote unquote underworld and so forth, you'll find, Atem is operating through that piece. So when the sun sets, that's also the inauguration of the moon rising and so forth. So when they talk about Bast as a firstborn daughter of Atem, and she's our protection until the day dawns, then Atem is operating through the setting sun, completion of the day. He's shifting from the day cycle to the night cycle. That in turn inaugurates the dominance of the moon, the Yayat and so forth, with the left eye of Ra. That's the ancient link of Bast operating through the moon. When her father sets in the red setting sun, then she rises through the moon when she's operating through the left eye of Ra, the moon. Some Egyptologists will pretend that Bast had nothing to do with the moon until the Greeks came along, and you read about that all the time, which is ridiculous. In the coffin text, thousands of years before the Greek invasion, we already have Bast protecting us, in the coffin text, protecting us until the day dawns because she's governing the moon. Now, the waxing and waning of the Yayat, the moon, visually reflects the eyes of the cat. We've always understood that. Hold on one second. Now, and then we talk about the magnetic force of the Yayat, the moon, also allows the perpetuation of the solar energy and light even through the darkness. So of course, the moon isn't shining its own light. It's reflecting the light of the Atanit, the sun, and reflecting that to earth. So even in darkness, we can find our way, we can navigate our path because we're illuminated by the moon. Therefore, Bast is engaged in her function of perpetuation, taking the solar energy and perpetuating that, just like she took the fusion of the Afurakani man, Afurakani woman, fused by Arit Ra and so forth, and she perpetuates that fusion through time, through affection. She takes the solar energy of the Atanit and perpetuates it even through the nighttime so we can be illuminated on our path, even in darkness. Not only physical darkness on earth, so the moon can light our path, so we can avoid, poisonous serpents or animals in the darkness or injury and so forth, and we can light our path and make our way through the darkness, but also through spiritual, quote unquote, blindness or darkness, we can navigate our way because we're illuminated with wisdom. Hold on one second. Okay. Now, so that's what we're saying in this portion. That's the function that she's executing through the Yayat of the moon. Yet the gravitational pull of the moon, the Yayat, also affects the expansion or rising of the tides on Earth, as well as the rising of the quote unquote tides within our bodies. So of course, Earth is about 71% water. We're over 70% water. The gravitational pull of the moon affects the rising of the tides on Earth. We're on Earth. It affects the rising of the tides within our bodies, meaning water retention. When we take in a deep breath, and even when we're taking in fluids and so forth, we can retain more of that water or we can release some of it. If we generate more fire, we release and evaporate some of that water, but we can also be more cool and retain more of that water. That means our tides will rise. The more we breathe in, the more moisture we take in and hold on to, we retain. The higher our tides rise and the more introspective and watery and intuitive we become. So That internal increase in water through retention cools us, facilitates receptivity, intuition, and attunement spiritually. Coolness lends itself to the measure of contemplation necessary to make proper assessments, resolve conflict, and reach balanced resolutions. Now, if we look at this term from ancient Kemet, it's spelled root or raut. In the language of Kemet, means to, as you can see here, to be strong, to thrive, to succeed, to prosper, to grow, to be sound, to flourish. And in the Coptic dialect, it's rot, or rot. Now, but to grow, to expand, to flourish, prosper, succeed, to be sound. Ra in Coptic becomes da in Akhan. Ara, the D is the D sound, and the rolling R sound is the tongue tapping the roof of the mouth once. So rat or ra becoming ra becomes ada in Akhan, and ara in Akhan. And da or ara in Akhan means to increase in quantity or number, to multiply, become numerous, to produce, attract, gather, to fill, become full. So it says to expand, multiply, bring forth abundantly, to grow, to fill, become full. Here it says to bring forth abundantly. This is the Akhan, Asante Fanti dictionary, and so forth. So the same term, ra, meaning to grow, expand, thrive, succeed, prosper, flourish, to be sound. Ra, that same term is pronounced ara in Akhan, meaning to grow abundantly, bring forth abundantly, to multiply, increase, to flourish, and so forth, to fill, become filled. Yet the same term, ara, in Akhan means love or affection, specifically dealing with affection. And we just go through the linguistic piece here. Ra in ancient Kemet is ara in Akhan, meaning the same thing. So when Het Heru fuses the Afurakani man and Afuraitkaitnit woman together in complementary balance via attraction, and that fusion is perpetuated by Bast via affection, our relationship grows, expands, flourishes, brings forth abundantly, becomes sound. That's the Ra function. That's ara, that's affection. So the pericardium keeps the heart stable, lubricated, and protected. Physiological shrine of Bast. That's the unguent oil jar, as we said before. When we experience the divine energy of Bast in this region, we experience that when we see our divine complement. When our physical or spiritual sight, left eye Ra is the moon, right eye Ra is the sun, and so forth. When Bast is operating through the yayat, the left eye, the moon, and so forth, the sight, the insight, and so forth, when our physical or spiritual sight is fixated upon our divine complement, our hearts begin to swell, become full, expand. Ara means full, grow, expand, and so forth. That's the direct link between the eye, sight, and the heart, the pericardium complex. So when we talk about, well, I saw the person, my divine complement, or my heart expanded, or my heart became full, and so forth, and you can feel some expansion, there's a direct link cosmologically between Bast as the eye of the moon, Arit Ra, the left eye of Ra, and so forth, and expansion, because she governs the pericardium as well. So the eye, she's governing the left eye, the eye of the moon, in the heavenly region of the body, the head region, in the earthly region of the body, the trunk, and so forth. In the heart, she's connected to the pericardium. So the heart swells when the left eye of the moon is perceiving the divine complement, direct connection between Bast in the eye and Bast in heaven and Bast on earth. Bast in the left eye of Ra, the moon, Bast in the pericardium. So we say when the Arit Ra, the left eye, Bast as the eye of the moon, is invoked, the sacred shrine of Bast surrounding our heart is invoked. Her divine energy of Ra or Ara, affection, thus manifests itself and establishes fidelity, the divine perpetuation of harmonious fusion. Our relationship thus expands, flourishes, brings forth abundantly, becomes sound. That's a cosmological reality and a physiological reality. While this reality has been a central component of our lived experience and thus woven into the fabric of our cosmology for thousands of years, it is only recently that the white star offspring have discovered, quote unquote, a biological basis for this dynamic. So we have a couple of links to these scientific articles and so forth, but it's been documented that those in a relationship, simply by staring at one another, can cause their heartbeats to synchronize with one another. There's a direct connection between the functions of the eye and the heart for bonding and perpetuating bonding. This is because there's a direct connection between Bast, as the Arit Ra, eye of Ra, operating through the moon, the Yayat, and the energy of the spiritual ab, or the spiritual heart pericardium complex. And then we have the article from National Geographic, Your Heart Can Sync with the Loved Ones. The article from the University of California, Davis study, talking about lovers' hearts beat in sync and so forth. So just to give a, recent contemporary corroboration for that. So, but again, cosmologically, when we invoke Bast in the context of ancestral ritual on a consistent basis, we avail ourselves of the fullness of her energy. That means when we're pouring libation, when we're engaging in ritual prayer, ritual song, ritual channel, or whatever we're doing, invoking Bast by name and so forth. Of course, in the meditative piece, when you invoke her by name, that image is going to come as well, and she will come forward and so forth. But via ritual, her shrine, when the Afurakani man invokes Bast via ritual, her shrine within his body, the shrine encasing the heart, is replenished. Therefore, when he sees or contemplates his divine complement, he experiences his heart expanding or swelling. He experiences Ara, which is that expansion, bringing forth abundantly affection. So his attraction for her, initiated by Arit Ra, is perpetuated via the expansive energy, the affection of Bast. That affection thus establishes fidelity permanently, for no matter where or when he sees any other woman, no matter how beautiful or magnetic, Bast will reveal to him how none can compare to his true divine complement. It's not just revealing intellectually. On an energetic level, nobody else is going to be able to match that energetic balance of the divine complement's spiritual configuration, energetic wise, to yours. It's impossible for somebody else to balance that out. So if you try to move in a different direction and you've been invoking Bast on a regular basis, and her heart center within you has been replenished and it's in tune and so forth, then when you come in contact with somebody else and you see them, the eye of Bast contemplating someone else is not going to cause the heart to swell. The eye of Bast only causes the heart to swell when you eye or see your divine complement, whose energy balances yours out. So that's where this notion of fidelity comes from. It doesn't matter. Another woman can be beautiful, another woman can be magnetic and so forth, but they're not going to be able to match the energetic balance that your divine complement has. So, and the same is true with the Afuraitkaitnit woman with regard to her Afurakani man's, man has her complement. The same is true in the reverse. Now, and the reason for that is because the Afurakani woman in this context, who was his divine complement, was brought to him by Arit Ra, the divinity of beauty, or the divinity beauty herself, and the union perpetuated by Bast, the divinity fidelity. So Bast is fidelity. Affection is really, the expression of divine, fidelity is the expression of divine affection. So Bast is fidelity. She's the one who perpetuates the union of Het Heru. She is fidelity. So when you're invoking Bast, you're invoking fidelity at the same time. So when you're doing that, it's effortless for the Afurakani man to reject any thought or act of infidelity, no matter the circumstances. So this idea that someone can control you or tempt you to the point where you end up cheating, you don't know what happened, and you couldn't control yourself, that's foolishness. And we've always taught that to our youth from the time they reach, go through rites of passage and forward. We don't have this idea that's perpetuated in Eurocentric culture, European culture, Eurasian culture, that you never know. Love just happens. You never know what can happen, where it can happen, and you just fall into it. And they're talking about lust, and they can't control themselves, so they try to put forth that that's a human trait, because they're not authentic human beings. They're a perversion of a human being. We're the authentic human beings, so we are connected to the forces in nature. We know the different categories and so forth. We know how to regulate our ba'at. It's not a problem. Fidelity is not a problem. We invoke the divinity who is fidelity. We invoke the divinity of beauty. And when we are invoking Het Heru and Bast, beauty and fidelity, then anybody who we come in contact with that we see through that eye of Bast and so forth, if she is not, in alignment with beauty and fidelity, meaning Het Heru and Bast, then it's no issue. We're not drawn to that. We would have to force ourselves to engage, because Het Heru and Bast are not directing us to do that. So this is why we say these are the keys. The permanent balanced relationships, marriages have always been present within our ancestral religion and culture. We only need to avail ourselves of its wisdom. So these are the things, and then when you read we did a whole, as we said, a whole course, 2 courses, parts 1 and 2, on the Baiti Seneb, divine cosmology, or cosmology of divine twin flame marriage, showing the marriages of the deities and how we emulate their, interactions in our lives and so forth, and incorporate that wisdom in our lives and so forth, and that energetic balance within our lives. We have that kind of information that is part of our ancestral culture that's passed on orally and through ritual and so forth. And now we do it in different ways. We're passing it on through courses and, seminars and books and things like that, so that people can get reconnected. But then eventually you have to engage the ritual process. Eventually you have to invoke your own your ba'at, your own your own ka'at, include Bast and Het Heru and these different divinities by name when you're engaged in ritual practice and so forth. And then you can align in that fashion. Okay, so all right, actually we are over the time. We wanted to stop at 1 o'clock, but we had to get through all that information. It's 1:52. So we're gonna go ahead and end it right here. We are gonna save this. We are gonna upload it to our YouTube site. We're gonna upload it to the Vimeo site as well. We're gonna post it, so look for the post probably later today or tomorrow and so forth. Also, we're going to be posting information about our upcoming new sessions, our new classes. We did the first 19 courses from last July up until this June, and we're going to have the new season starting, in September. And we're going to show you what, we'll let you know what courses are coming up, and you can sign up for these courses. Our 6-week courses are $30 for 6 weeks. You can pay $15 up front, and the other $15, in a couple of weeks if you want to do that. If you would like to take any one of the other 19 courses that we have, let me show that once again. On our Akongwasuya page on the website. And these are the different courses. All of the 6-week courses here, as we said before, are half price, so it's $15. The 4-week courses are $10. Like Hoodoo Part 1 is a 4-week course, Hoodoo Part 4 is a 4-week course. And we also had, there's one other course that was 4 weeks as well. So The Akhan film non-assumed course is 4 weeks. So but all the other ones are 6 weeks. So $10 for the 4-week courses, $15 for the 6-week courses. And we send you the videos and we send you the links and passwords and so forth. Most of them about each session, each weekly session is about 2.5 hours long, sometimes a little bit longer. And then of course, the books that we're talking about, you can download all 31 of our books for free. You can also order the softcover versions of our books if you would like to support the work we're doing. And also, for those who are unaware, actually we have it in the Bast piece. This is our film, Amarukafo Adivisa, African American Ancestral Divination. It is on demand, available on demand. You can watch it on our site, on the Vimeo site, the on-demand site. We won an award for the documentary film back in January at the Kwanzaa Film Festival in New York. We also went to LA. We were accepted at the Pembroke Taparelli Arts and Film Festival in Los Angeles back in November. And we went there and the film was screened and well received. And they also asked us to speak on a panel, myself and Voodoo Queen Galinda Laveau, who's also in the film. We spoke on a panel on indigenous religion and so forth. So check out the film. It's received great reviews from around the world. People have downloaded it from over 14 countries. They really appreciate the information. So the rental is $7. The purchase for the download is $10, so you can check that out. Okay. Okay, so we had a question in the chat room, and Kate, I'll say thank you. We appreciate the comment. So is Bast separate from Sekhmet? Yes, so Bast is governing even physiologically. She governs the pericardium. Sekhmet governs the lymphatic system. So Bast and Sekhmet are two different divinities who have different functions and creation, but they do work together. So just like your heart, the pericardium, and the heart, and the lungs, and all these different organs, they're different entities, but they work together interdependently. The same is true of Bast and Sekhmet. The only confusion comes in is when Egyptologists see that they have similar functions and they'll just say, well, Bast is a form of Sekhmet, or Sekhmet is a form of Bast, or Sekhmet is a form of Het-Heru. Totally inaccurate. Het-Heru is a divinity. Sekhmet is a different divinity. Het-Heru governs, for example, in the body, the exocrine system. Sekhmet governs the lymphatic system and is rooted in the bone marrow and so forth. Bast governs the pericardium and so forth. So each one has a different shrine in the body. They have different shrines on earth, and they have different functions in creation. Now, depending on, so the colors of Bast, depending on, she can take the totemic form of a cat or the totemic form of a lioness. So sometimes she'll have that green, sometimes she'll have red. Depending on the fiery energy, it's more red and white and so forth. She'll have colors with green and blue and so forth. So it depends on her form. Depends on what totemic form she's taking and what, is she functioning as the nurturer, the mother, the healer, or is she functioning as the divine killer? So it just depends on that. We do perform divination. Right now we are a little bit backed up, so we'll be probably like the end of September or October before we can get to everyone or new people. So, but we can also direct you to, for example, individuals in the film like Voodoo Queen Galinda Laveau and Kajara and so forth, and Sashat. They do divination as well. So if you need something sooner than the end of September or October, I can direct you to them as well. And that's anybody who's asking about that. We do that amongst one another. If we can't get to somebody right away and someone needs divination right away, we can I direct people to Kalinda all the time or Kajara. So we do that on a regular basis. Okay, so yeah, so we're going to go ahead and end it here, but yes, we'll have this posted up. Yet I say thank you everybody for tuning in. We're going to have these you know, sessions like periodically. So we'll have our classes, you know, that go into detail about specific things, but periodically we will do a seminar, a webinar on the weekend touching on a specific aspect of the culture, a specific divinity, targeted on a certain thing, just for people to get familiar with that. So we'll be posting that schedule soon. We have our new year coming up. For us in Akwamu Mine, Amarukai Tifimu, the Akwamu Nation in North America, and Akhan people in the Western Hemisphere in general, our New Year observance is September 16th through the 22nd. And the autumn equinox is the first day of our new year, which for us will be 13,021, 100 days before 2021. Of course, 2021 is not a proper designation. Nothing happened 2,000 years ago. There was no character named Jesus or Yeshua and so forth. That's a fictional character. So we don't track time based on a fictional cartoon character. We're in 13,020 right now. We move into 13,021. We're in the midst of a 26,000 year astronomical cycle. Hence the year is beginning with 13,000. And we'll be moving into 13,021 on September 22nd, which is coming up within a couple of weeks. So our New Year observance is coming up. We also have our Hoodoo Mine, Hoodoo Nation Festival coming up in October. So we're going to have information on all these things coming up. So again, Yerase, we thank everybody for joining in, and Yibishabil, we will meet again. What's up?